The mark on my wrist moved. Not like ink, like something alive. Black thorns curled across my brown skin, thin and sharp-looking, winding from the inside of my wrist toward my palm. I could feel them beneath the surface, cold as winter water, tightening with every breath I took. Patrick saw it and went still, not calm, still, the kind of stillness that came before something broke. "Grace," he said softly. I knew that tone already. It meant he was about to make a terrible decision and call it protection. "No," I told him. His golden eyes snapped to mine. "You do not know what I'm about to say. You are about to tell me to run." I was going to phrase it more elegantly. "Still no." The ground split wider between us. From beneath the old garden, darkness rose like smoke-given bones. Long fingers clawed at the black soil. Faces formed and vanished inside the shadow, mouths opening too wide, eyes burning like coals buried in ash. Morrow stepped in front of me with his blade drawn. "Your Grace," he said, "we need to move her." "No one moves her anywhere without her consent," Patrick said. For one ridiculous second, my heart hurt with love for him. Then the first creature climbed fully out of the earth. It was shaped almost like a man, if a man had been made from burnt branches and old grief. Its limbs bent wrong, its head turned toward me, and the thorn mark on my wrist answered with a sharp pulse. Patrick's expression changed. The man vanished. The Duke remained. He crossed the garden faster than my eyes could follow. One moment he stood before me. The next, he had the creature by the throat. Black fire spilled from his hand, silent and absolute. The thing did not scream. It simply came apart, scattering into ash across the silver roots. The Hollow King laughed from below. "My beautiful, ruined boy," the voice murmured, "still so eager to bare your teeth." Patrick looked toward the broken ground. "You always mistake mercy for weakness," he said, "an embarrassing flaw in something so ancient." More shadows pulled themselves free. Not 3, not 10, dozens. They crawled from the soil, dropped from the silver trees, unfolded from cracks in the glass dome above. The garden filled with them, all of them turning toward me as if the mark on my wrist had become a lantern. Morrow grabbed my arm. Lady Holloway, behind me. I did not argue this time. I stepped back, clutching my cross with my marked hand. The metal warmed beneath my fingers. "Lord," I whispered, though my voice shook, "stand with us." The nearest creature lunged. Morrow met it with his blade. Steel flashed. Black sap sprayed across the path. He moved with terrifying precision. Every strike clean, every step measured. But there were too many of them. Patrick fought like a storm that had learned hatred. He tore through the shadows with fire and claw and power I could feel in my teeth. The air snapped around him. The silver trees bent away from his wrath. Every time one of the creatures came near me, it died before it could touch the hem of my dress. And still they came. One dropped behind Morrow. I saw it before he did. "Morrow!" He turned, but not fast enough. The creature's branch-like arm drove into his side. Morrow grunted once. Patrick heard. The garden went silent around him. Then he moved. He did not simply kill the creature that hurt Morrow. He erased it. Black gold fire swallowed it from the inside out, and the force of Patrick's rage cracked the stone path beneath his boots. Morrow fell to one knee, one hand pressed against his side. I ran to him. "Do not," he said through clenched teeth. "Stay back. I run a shelter. I know what bleeding looks like. That is not blood." I did not ask. I tore a strip from the edge of my skirt and pressed it against his wound. His breath hissed sharply. "Apologies," he said, even while half collapsed. "Do not apologize for being stabbed. A lapse in professionalism. Bleed quietly then." His mouth twitched despite the pain. Behind us, Patrick's power surged. The temperature in the garden dropped. The black fire around him deepened until it was no longer gold at the edges. it became something colder, hungrier. The shadows nearest him stopped attacking and began to bow. My stomach tightened. "Patrick?" I called. He did not turn. The Hollow King's voice slid through the roots. "There he is. Not the gentleman, not the lover, not the wounded saint she imagines. There is my weapon." Patrick lifted one hand. Every creature in the garden froze. For one breath I thought he had won. Then their bodies began twisting inward, bones and branches snapping, shadows folding into one another. He was not destroying them. He was pulling them into himself. The dark lines of the curse blazed across his chest and throat. His golden eyes burned brighter, but there was something wrong in them now. Something distant. Something empty. "Patrick!" I shouted. He still did not hear me. Morrow grabbed my wrist weakly. "Lady Holloway, no." But I was already standing. The thorn mark burned as I ran toward Patrick. Pain shot up my arm, but I kept going. A creature turned toward me, mouth splitting open, and Patrick killed it without looking. That frightened me more than if he had missed it. He knew where I was, but he was not with me. The Hollow King laughed softly. "Let him finish it, little bride. Let him become what saved you." "No," I said. Patrick's hand rose higher. The shadows screamed as they unraveled, their darkness pouring into him like smoke into a wound. The glass dome cracked overhead, raining glittering shards that vanished before they struck the ground. I reached him. I grabbed his face in both hands and forced him to look at me. His skin was burning beneath my palms. For a moment, his eyes were not Patrick's. They were old fire and grief, and every terrible thing hell had taught him to survive. "Patrick," I said, my voice breaking. "Come back to me." Nothing. The mark on my wrist tightened until I almost cried out. So I tried again. Not louder. Closer. "Patrick Vale." His breath caught. The darkness around him shuddered. "I am here," I told him. "I chose you. Not this. Not him. You." His eyes flickered. The Hollow King's voice sharpened. "She will die like all gentle things die." Patrick flinched. I pressed my forehead to his. "Then do not waste the time we have being his." The fire in his eyes broke. He gasped as if surfacing from deep water. The shadows he had been pulling into himself tore free and scattered across the garden, howling as Patrick released them. They fled into the cracks in the soil, dragging their broken shapes after them. The ground sealed with a violent snap. Silence fell. Not peace, only the absence of immediate death. Patrick's hands came up slowly and closed around my wrists. He stared at me as if he could not decide whether to be furious or grateful. "What," he said, voice ragged, "is wrong with you?" I let out a shaky breath. "That is a long list." "You ran toward me. You were leaving. I was winning. No, you were disappearing." His jaw tightened. Behind us, Morrow coughed. That brought Patrick fully back. He was beside him in an instant, kneeling on the dark soil. His hand hovered over Morrow's wound, then stopped. Morrow caught his eye. "Do it, Your Grace. It may hurt. It already hurts." Patrick muttered something unkind under his breath and pressed his palm to Morrow's side. Gold fire spread between his fingers, stitching the wound closed with light. Morrow went rigid, but made no sound. I knelt beside them. "Will he live?" Morrow opened one eye. "I am present. You are also dramatic. I have been influenced by poor company." Patrick gave a strained laugh, but it faded quickly. The garden around us was ruined. Silver leaves lay scattered across scorched soil. The flowers had withered into black curls. The glass dome above was cracked open, showing the red-gold underworld sky beyond, and on my wrist, the thorn remained. Patrick saw me looking at it. His face closed. "No," I said immediately. "I have not spoken. You do not have to. Your shoulders are making decisions. I am sending you home." "No." This is not a debate. It is if you expect me to participate. He stood too quickly. You think courage is the same thing as wisdom. And you think fear is the same thing as love. That struck him. Good. He deserved it. Patrick looked away first. The Hollow King can reach you now. Through the mark. Through me. Every moment you remain here, you are more endangered than you understand. I understand enough. No, Grace. His voice cracked over my name. You do not. That mark means he can hurt you to punish me. He can use your dreams, your blood, your memories. He can make me watch. I stepped closer. Then we fight him. He laughed once, bitter and broken. You say that as if war is a stubborn landlord. I have handled those too. Grace. I am afraid, I said. That stopped him. I am afraid, I repeated, softer this time. I am not pretending I am not. But I will not let fear make every choice for me. I have lived too long around people who were told they had no choice. His eyes searched mine. I reached for his hand. He let me take it. Just barely. You are not getting rid of me because hell got loud. His mouth twisted. Hell is often loud. Then I will adjust. You are impossible. You have mentioned that. I meant it fondly this time. Progress. For a moment we only stood there amid the wreckage, his hand wrapped around mine, Morrow pretending not to watch us, while definitely watching us. Patrick's thumb moved over my knuckles. I nearly lost myself, he said quietly. I know. You should be horrified. I was. His gaze lifted. But I was not surprised, I said. Hurt people reach for what helped them survive. And what if what helped me survive is monstrous? Then we teach it new work. His face changed in a way I did not have a name for. Before he could hide from it, I stepped closer and touched his cheek. He inhaled. Grace, he warned, but there was no strength behind it. This is not for the court, I whispered. Not for the curse, not for a contract. His eyes dropped to my mouth. Then what is it for? You. That undid him. Patrick kissed me like a man surrendering a war he had been fighting alone for centuries. There was nothing polished in it, nothing performed. His hand came to the back of my neck, careful even in hunger, while his other arm wrapped around my waist and pulled me close. He kissed me as if he had been starving and terrified of the meal, as if every touch might burn, as if he expected me to vanish if he wanted too much. I did not vanish. I held on to him. His mouth softened against mine. The desperation shifted into something deeper, quieter, more dangerous than want. Trust. When he finally drew back, his forehead rested against mine. I am ruined, he whispered. No, I said. You are loved. The thorn mark on my wrist flared. Pain lanced up my arm, sharp enough to steal my breath. Patrick looked down. The black thorns had grown. And somewhere beneath the garden, the Hollow King began to laugh again.
Author's point of view.
The Hollow King's laughter followed them out of the ruined garden. It clung to Grace's bones as Patrick tore open a door between worlds, one hand locked around hers, the other still stained with shadow. The thorn mark on her wrist pulsed beneath his fingers, cold and cruel, as if something far below the earth had learned the shape of her heartbeat. You should not have asked for this, Patrick said. Grace looked at him. And you should know by now that I will. The door opened into Mercy House. Warm air met them first, then the smell of soup, laundry soap, old wood, and children. Grace nearly folded under the relief of it. For one small second, everything looked normal. Mrs. Alvarez stood in the hallway with a basket of towels against her hip. Father Marcus was near the office door, sleeves rolled, speaking quietly with one of the volunteers. From upstairs came the sound of little feet and someone laughing too loudly. Home. Then Mrs. Alvarez saw Grace's wrist. Her smile vanished. Patrick stepped slightly in front of Grace, all sharp angles and watchful silence. He looked wrong in the shelter's soft yellow light, like a blade placed on a kitchen table. Father Marcus crossed the hall slowly. His eyes moved from Grace to Patrick, then to the black thorn mark curling against her brown skin. "What happened?" he asked. Grace opened her mouth, but a child's voice cut through the hallway. "Miss Grace." Eli came running down the stairs, blanket dragging behind him. Tessa followed with a sketchbook hugged to her chest. The twins appeared after her, both talking at once. Grace dropped to her knees before she realized she had moved. She opened her arms and Eli crashed into her. The others followed, small bodies pressing close, hands grabbing her sleeves, her hair, the front of her dress. She held them as tightly as she dared. "You came back," Eli whispered. "I told you I would." "You were gone too long." Grace closed her eyes. "I know." Patrick stood behind her, silent. Tessa peeked around Grace's shoulder at him. "You came too." Patrick lifted one brow. "I was dragged." "No, you weren't." "No," he admitted after a beat. "I was not." Tessa did not smile. Instead, she opened her sketchbook. Grace looked down. The drawing stole the warmth from the room. It was Patrick, done in heavy black crayon, standing beneath trees with no leaves. Around his chest was a crown of thorns, each point driven inward toward his heart. Behind him, a tall figure with a hollow face reached with long hands. Grace touched the page carefully. "When did you draw this?" "Last night," Tessa said. "After the dream." The twins stopped whispering. Eli's grip tightened on Grace's dress. Father Marcus's voice lowered. "Several of the children had nightmares." "What kind?" Patrick asked. The room seemed to notice his voice and grow quieter. Eli looked at Grace first, then at Patrick. "Black trees in the basement." One of the twins nodded. "And something scratching." "The boiler makes sounds," Mrs. Alvarez said, but no one believed it. From below the floorboards came a soft, patient knock. Once, twice, 3 times. Patrick turned his head toward the basement door. Grace felt the thorn mark tighten. "No," she whispered. The knock became a scrape. Father Marcus moved toward the children. "Mrs. Alvarez, upstairs, now." Grace stood, already guiding Eli toward the stairwell. "Take them to the back room, lock the door. No one opens it unless they hear my voice." "I'm not leaving you," Eli said. "Yes, you are." Grace cupped his face. "And you are going to be brave enough to obey me." His lower lip trembled, but he nodded. Patrick watched the basement door as the wood began to bow inward. "Grace," he said, calm in a way that frightened her. "Go with them." "No." His jaw tightened. "We're not doing this here." "We are exactly doing this here." The basement door split. Dark roots burst through the frame. The first creature dragged itself into Mercy House with long, jointed limbs and a mouthful of splinters. Behind it came another, then another, their bodies dripping black soil onto the clean hallway floor. Patrick moved. He did not burn them where they stood. He could have. Grace saw that in the sudden flash of fire along his hands. Instead, he drove them backward with a force that cracked the plaster, but spared the children's drawings taped to the wall. "Not in this house," he said. The creature lunged. Patrick caught it by the throat and hurled it through the church doors into the sanctuary beyond. The others followed, skittering along the walls, snapping at his coat, tearing dark lines through the fabric and the skin beneath. Grace helped Mrs. Alvarez push the children upstairs, then shut the door behind them. Another crash shook the hall. She turned back. Father Marcus stood near the sanctuary entrance, a wooden cross gripped in one hand. His face was steady, though Grace could see the fear in his eyes. "Father," she said, "please." He did not move away. "This is still my church." Inside the sanctuary, Patrick fought beneath the stained glass windows. The sight burned itself into Grace's memory. He stood between the creatures and the altar, black coat torn, golden eyes bright, blood running down one side of his neck. Every time one of them tried to crawl toward the communion table, he dragged it back with shadowed chains and threw it into the aisle. One creature slashed across his ribs. Patrick staggered. Grace started forward. He saw her and snarled, "Stay back!" The creature opened its mouth and shrieked. Patrick lifted his hand to destroy it, then froze when it stumbled too close to the altar rail. His fingers curled into a fist. He took the attack instead. Claws raked across his shoulder, deep enough to make him drop to one knee. Father Marcus stepped into the sanctuary. "Patrick!" The Duke's head snapped up. For a moment, Grace thought he would unleash every terrible thing inside him. Instead, Patrick gritted his teeth, seized the creature by its skull, and vanished with it in a burst of dark fire. He reappeared near the broken basement door and flung the thing down into the shadows below. One by one, he forced them back. Not killed, banished. When the last root-wrapped hand disappeared beneath the floor, Patrick slammed the door shut with a wave of power. Gold symbols burned across the frame, sealing it until the wood stopped trembling. Then the church went still. Patrick stood in the aisle, breathing hard. Blood marked his coat, his hands, the floor beneath him. But not the altar. Grace reached him first. She caught his arm before he could pretend he was steady. "You're hurt. I'm frequently hurt. It gives me character. You are bleeding on Father Marcus's carpet." Father Marcus approached slowly. "It has seen worse." Patrick looked at him with dry disbelief. "That seems unlikely. You would be surprised what people bring to God." Something shifted in Patrick's face. He looked away. Father Marcus stopped beside him. "You chose not to spill blood near the altar." Patrick's mouth tightened. "Do not make it holy." "I was going to make it noticed." For once, Patrick had no sharp answer. Father Marcus's gaze softened. "You are not the first wounded thing to come into this church." The words landed harder than any blade. Patrick went very still. Grace felt his hand flex beneath hers, as if he wanted to pull away but could not quite remember how. Later, after the children were finally asleep and the basement had been sealed with salt, prayer, and Patrick's more frightening contribution, Grace found him in the shelter kitchen. He sat at the table with his ruined coat discarded over a chair, his black shirt torn open at the shoulder. A bowl of clean water sat before him untouched. "I assume you are waiting for the wound to become embarrassed and close itself?" Grace said. Patrick glanced up. "It has worked before." She took the cloth from the bowl and sat beside him. She began cleaning the blood from his shoulder. His breath caught. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No." She pressed the cloth a little firmer. He hissed. Grace gave him a look. Patrick sighed. "A modest amount. You are a terrible liar when you are tired." "I am an excellent liar. You are simply intrusive." She cleaned the cuts in silence for a while. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Somewhere above them, a child fell asleep. Patrick watched the movement of her hands as though care itself was a language he had once known and forgotten. "You should hate that I brought this here," he said quietly. Grace did not look up. "Did you?" "The Hollow King followed my curse. He followed my mark, too. Because of me." "Patrick." His eyes lifted. Grace set the cloth down and took his bloodied hand in both of hers. "Those children were alive tonight because you stood between them and the dark. They were in danger because I exist. They were in danger because evil reaches for what love protects." The thorn mark on her wrist pulsed. Patrick saw it and brought her hand carefully to his mouth. He kissed the mark as if he could soften it by tenderness alone. Grace's chest ached. "I do not know how to save you from this," he whispered. "Then do not save me alone." His lips remained against her wrist for one more breath. Then the church bell rang once, though no hand had touched it. Patrick looked toward the sanctuary. His expression hardened. "The crown will have heard." Grace stood with him. "Then we make them answer." Patrick's smile was faint, dangerous, and tired. "Yes," he said, "we do."
The bell at Mercy House rang once, though no human hand had touched it. I knew that sound. Not church bronze, not a holy warning. Something older had borrowed the shape of it and pressed its mouth to the metal. The infernal crown was calling. Grace stood beside me in the kitchen, her marked wrist still in my hand. The black thorns curled over her brown skin, sharper than before, pulsing as if they enjoyed being witnessed. "No," I said. She looked at me. "You do not even know what I'm going to say." "You are going to insist on coming." "I am. And I'm going to refuse." "You may. I enjoy that you think this is charming. I think it is predictable." Father Marcus entered the kitchen doorway, his wooden cross still in his hand. He looked at Grace first because he was a sensible man, then at me, because apparently even sensible men enjoyed disappointing themselves. "What does it mean?" he asked. "It means the Crown has noticed the smoke and would like to complain about the fire," I said. Grace squeezed my fingers. "Patrick." "It means," I corrected, "that Hell's rulers have summoned us." Father Marcus's expression did not change, but his grip tightened around the cross. "Us?" "Her," I said. "They summoned her by summoning me." Grace lifted her chin. "Then we answer." I turned to her fully. "You have been stabbed at by shadows, marked by an ancient dead tyrant, and nearly dragged into my worst impulses in the last hour. Perhaps sit down. Perhaps stop giving orders when you are frightened." There it was, the blade under the tenderness. I hated when she was right. It happened with offensive frequency. "I am not frightened," I said. Grace only looked at me. Fine, I was frightened. I was terrified in ways I did not yet have the dignity to name. The Crown could not touch her in a church, not directly. But in hell, in the royal hall, they could wrap murder in law and call it balance. They could smile while discussing the cleanest way to sacrifice the woman I loved. Father Marcus stepped closer. "Bring her back." I am beginning to resent how many people say that to me. "Bring her back," he repeated. The man had steel hidden beneath all that mercy. Annoying, admirable, human. "I will," I said. Grace gave the priest one last look, then turned to me. "Open the door." So I did. The kitchen wall split like black silk. Heat rolled through, not the honest warmth of fire, but the perfumed breath of the Underworld court. Iron, smoke, roses grown in bone ash, and centuries of beautiful people lying through their teeth. I stepped through first. Grace followed before I could tell her not to. Of course she did. The royal hall waited on the other side, vast and cruelly magnificent. 7 black thrones rose on a dais carved from volcanic glass. Above them floated the infernal crown itself, not worn by any single head, but suspended in the air, a ring of burning metal and old authority. Around the hall, nobles gathered in tiers of shadow and gold, their eyes hungry. They had come dressed for judgment. How quaint. I had come dressed in a torn shirt with blood drying on my skin. Grace stood beside me in the simple clothes she had worn from Mercy House. No jewels, no infernal silks, no borrowed crown. Just Grace, with her cross at her throat and thorns on her wrist. The court noticed. A ripple moved through them. "The Thorn Bride," someone whispered. I smiled without warmth. "Say it again. I'm in a generous mood and would love an excuse." Silence fell quickly. A voice descended from the crown, layered and cold. "Duke of the 7th Circle, you have brought war to the mortal threshold." "I did not bring it," I said. "I merely failed to die before it arrived." "You bound yourself to a human soul of dangerous purity." Grace's hand brushed mine. "Not clinging. Warning." "You say that as if it were a crime," she said. The hall turned toward her. I felt my curse stir, alert and delighted by the possibility of violence. Another voice spoke from among the nobles. "The woman bears the Hollow King's mark. Give her to the crown. We will contain what she has awakened." My vision narrowed. Grace's fingers closed around mine. Vespera stepped from the left side of the hall, draped in silver black silk, her eyes sharp enough to cut a promise in half. She looked at Grace not with simple hatred, but calculation. That was worse. Containment may not be enough, Vespera said. If the Hollow King has marked her, then she is not merely beloved. She is a gate, a living threshold. If he reaches through her, he reaches every place she loves. Mercy House, the children. The image passed through me so violently, I nearly lost the shape of the room. Vespera saw it. Her mouth tightened. I am not your enemy tonight, Patrick. How unfortunate. I had arranged my evening around it. Her gaze flicked to Grace. You know the strategy. Remove what the enemy wants, or the enemy chooses the battlefield. Grace stepped forward. I did not let go of her hand. She looked small beneath the thrones, which was misleading. Mountains often began as things ignored underfoot. You all speak, she said, as if love started this war. No one interrupted her, not even me. It did not, Grace continued. Cruelty did, chains did, curses did. All the things you built and called order because you were not the ones bleeding under it. The court shifted. Vespera's eyes sharpened. Grace lifted her marked wrist. The black thorns gleamed against her skin. You look at this and see a problem to remove. I look at it and see proof that evil always reaches for the person it thinks no one will defend. Something moved through my chest. Pride, perhaps. Fear, certainly. Love, unbearable and bright. Grace turned her eyes to the crown. I will not be handed over to make cowards comfortable. And if you think sacrificing one woman will satisfy a king who feeds on surrender, then you have learned nothing from hell except how to kneel. The silence after that was magnificent. I considered applauding. It felt inappropriate. It also felt necessary. The crown's fire dimmed, then flared. Grace Holloway, it said, you stand in a realm whose laws you do not understand. She did not flinch. Then explain why your laws keep protecting monsters. A few nobles hissed. I laughed before I could stop myself. The crown turned its attention back to me. Duke Vale, you will surrender the mortal woman for warding and sever all unauthorized war efforts. You will not raise legions. You will not move against the Hollow King without command. Ah, I said. There it is. Grace looked at me. Morrow, bandaged and grim, appeared at the edge of the hall. He must have followed through some servant passage, because the man could be bleeding to death and still worry about protocol. The crown's voice hardened. Disobedience will be treason. I looked at the 7 thrones, at the nobles who had hidden behind me when they needed terror done cleanly, at Vespera, whose face revealed nothing, at Grace, who had walked into hell with church smoke in her hair and told the crown the truth. Treason. Such a dramatic little word. I stepped forward. I removed the black court seal from my coat and let it fall onto the glass floor. The sound cracked through the hall. I have served this realm for centuries, I said. Brilliantly, on occasion. Viciously, more often. You dressed my violence in titles when it benefited you, then called me unstable when it became inconvenient. The crown burned hotter. I smiled up at it. Tonight, I am finished asking permission to protect what you are too afraid to defend. A marshal moved toward me. I glanced at him. He stopped. Wise man. Vespera spoke quietly. You walk into outlawry. I do so with excellent posture. You will lose your lands. I have never been sentimental about architecture. Your armies, the loyal ones will follow. The clever ones will pretend they were always loyal. The cowards may stay here and polish the thrones. A murmur spread, fear and fascination braided together. Grace looked at me, and for one dangerous moment, the entire court disappeared. There was only her hand sliding into mine, her mark burning, her courage steadier than any crown. Morrow crossed the hall and stood at my right. "Your Grace," he said. "You are injured," I told him. "Yes." "Go rest." "No." Everyone has become very disobedient lately. I have been inspired by leadership. Grace almost smiled. The Crown spoke one final time. "Leave this hall, Patrick Vale, and you leave under sentence." I bowed, not deeply, never deeply. "How refreshing," I said. "I have been meaning to update my reputation." Then I turned my back on the infernal crown and walked out with my wife beside me. Outside the royal hall, the black sky churned. Across hell, messages were already flying. Embers carrying my seal, shadows slipping beneath doors, old debts waking in old hands. By the time we reached the iron steps, figures had begun to gather. Ash soldiers with broken horns, gate witches wrapped in red veils, servants who had watched too much cruelty and sharpened knives in silence, demons who owed me favors, demons who hated me, but hated the Hollow King more. Morrow stood bleeding at my side. Grace stood marked at my left. I looked out over them all. For once I did not feel like a duke addressing subjects. I felt like a man choosing a side. "If hell wants a war," I said as the first banners rose in the dark, "then hell should have remembered who it taught to be terrifying." My fortress had survived sieges, betrayals, court theatrics, infernal winters, and one memorable dinner party involving poisoned figs. It had never survived Grace Holloway, standing in its war room and telling frightened demons to breathe. "Look at me," she said to a kitchen maid, whose hands were shaking too hard to hold the evacuation lantern. "You know the servants' stairs?" The maid nodded. "Good. Take the children, the injured, and anyone who cannot fight. East Passage first. No one goes alone." The maid looked at me. A common mistake. Grace touched her arm. "Not him, me, go." The maid went. I watched Grace move through my fortress like she had been born commanding battlefields, instead of running a shelter with leaking pipes and donated soup cans. Her marked wrist was wrapped in white cloth, but the black thorns bled through it in dark, twisting lines. The Hollow King had marked her. Now he had found us. The first impact struck the outer gate hard enough to crack the mountain beneath it. Dust rained from the ceiling. Morrow stood beside me, bandaged under his armor, expression carved from duty and terrible judgment. "You are not healed," I said. "No. I forbid you to fight." "I heard you." "That was not an agreement." "No." Another blow hit the gates. Beyond the fortress walls, something screamed. Not a creature, many creatures. An army dragging itself out of whatever grave the Hollow King had been keeping beneath the world. Grace looked toward the sound. For half a breath, fear crossed her face. Then she swallowed it and turned back to the servants. Brave, impossibly brave, not untouched by terror, never that. She simply refused to let terror drive. It made me want to kneel. It made me want to burn the world for daring to frighten her. "Patrick," she said. I was at her side before the second syllable finished leaving her mouth. Her eyes lifted to mine. "Do not lose yourself out there." I smiled. It felt wrong on my mouth. "Darling, I am the thing enemies lose themselves trying to escape." She did not smile back. Her hand found mine, quick and warm. "I mean it." So did I. That was the trouble. The third blow shattered the gate. War entered my house. The outer courtyard vanished beneath smoke, iron, and shadow. Hollow soldiers poured through the breach, no longer only twig-limbed nightmares from the garden. These wore armor made of old bones and blackened crowns. Their faces shifted beneath their helms. Men, demons, kings, children, every shape cruelty liked to borrow. My soldiers met them at the stairs. Some stood firm, Some ran. Some changed sides before the first blade fell, tearing off my sigil as if they had never eaten at my table, never begging for protection under my roof. I killed those last. Not gently. Black gold fire opened in my hands, and I stepped into the courtyard. The first line of hollow soldiers broke against me. I tore one apart with flame, drove another beneath the stone, snapped a third's neck and used the body to throw back the next wave. The old part of me woke up with a sigh. There you are, it seemed to say. I ignored it. At the western wall, Morrow fought like a man who had no intention of surviving and considered that everyone else's inconvenience. His blade flashed once, twice, again, cutting a path through soldiers twice his size. "Morrow!" I shouted. He glanced at me, which was his mistake. A hollow captain drove spear through his side. For one moment, sound left the world. Morrow looked down at the spear, offended more than surprised, then dropped to one knee. I crossed the courtyard in a burst of fire. The captain turned. I caught his helm in one hand and crushed it inward. "Your Grace," Morrow said through his teeth. "The gate." "I am aware of the gate. You are attending to me. You are bleeding on my stones. A tactical error. Yes, yours." I pressed fire to his wound. He went rigid, jaw locked so hard I heard his teeth grind. "Live," I ordered. His eyes narrowed. I had planned to. Something cracked above us. Not stone, air. A tear opened near the ruined gate, thin as a wound and glowing with churchlight. My heart stopped. A small body tumbled through and hit the ground hard. Eli. He lay in the ash, clutching that ridiculous blanket, eyes wide with terror. No, 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 no. Grace saw him from the inner archway. "Eli!" She ran. Of course she ran. A hollow soldier turned toward the boy, lifting a hooked blade. I moved, but the battlefield caught at me. 3 soldiers, then 6, then a net of shadow thrown from the breach. I burned through it too slowly. The blade came down. A young demon servant threw himself over Eli. Ren. I knew him only because Grace had made me know him. 3 days ago, he had dropped a tray in her presence and looked ready to be executed for it. Grace had knelt, gathered broken cups with him, and asked his name. Ren, kitchen runner, 17, one horn cracked from some old punishment no one had cared enough to heal. Now he stood between a child and death, with nothing but a serving knife in his hand. The hollow blade struck him through the chest. Ren made one small sound. Eli screamed. The world went red. Not with blood, with me. I do not remember crossing the courtyard. I remember the soldier's face in my hand. I remember his body unraveling, thread by screaming thread. I remember the others turning to flee and discovering there was nowhere in my fortress I could not reach. "Patrick!" Grace shouted. I did not answer. The hollow army surged. Good. Let them. I opened myself wider than I should have. The curse rose eagerly, old and faithful, filling the spaces grief tore open. Fire darkened around my hands. Shadows bent toward me like grass before a storm. I did not simply kill the soldiers nearest me. I emptied them. Power poured through me, cold and vast and starving. The fortress walls groaned. The sky above the courtyard split into veins of black lightning. Enemy soldiers fell to their knees, not in surrender, but because their bones had forgotten how to hold them upright. Some of my own soldiers backed away, wise of them. I lifted my hand toward the breach. Every hollow creature in the courtyard froze. Then they began to burn from the inside. Their screams rose together, a choir made for hell, and beneath it came that voice, soft, pleased. "There you are," the Hollow King whispered, "my beautiful ruined boy." The words slid under my skin like a knife finding an old scar. Beautiful ruined boy. The battlefield blurred. I was not in my courtyard. I was nowhere. I was every command I had obeyed, every mercy I had buried. Every time hell told me tenderness was a weakness, and I believed it because believing was easier than grieving. The fire in my hands turned darker. The hollow soldiers stopped screaming. So did my own. A terrible quiet spread outward from me. I could end it. All of it. The army, the fortress, the fear, the fragile things always needing protection. I could become so monstrous that nothing would dare touch what was mine again. Mine. The curse loved that word. Hands seized my face. Warm hands. Firm hands. Grace stood in front of me, ash in her hair, tears bright in her eyes. Her brown skin marked with soot and battle smoke. She had run through a courtyard of dying monsters to reach me. Foolish woman. Brave woman. My Grace. Patrick, she said. Her voice shook, but her grip did not. I could not remember how to speak. Her thumbs pressed against my cheekbones, forcing my eyes to find hers. Patrick, come back to me. The Hollow King hissed inside the dark. She cannot keep you. Grace stepped closer, as if she heard him too and despised his opinion. You are not his, she said. Do you hear me? Not his weapon, not his ruined boy. You are Patrick Vale, and I'm asking you to come back. My name struck something the curse had not managed to rot. The fire faltered. Pain followed. Real pain. Mine. I gasped. The shadows I had gathered tore loose from my body and slammed outward, shattering against the broken gate. Hollow soldiers fell like cut strings, the breach sealed in a violent flash of gold and black, stone grinding back into stone with a scream that shook the fortress towers. Then my knees hit the ground. Grace came down with me. For one moment I could only breathe with my forehead pressed against her shoulder, my hands fisted in the fabric of her dress like a desperate, undignified fool. She held me anyway. Behind her, Eli sobbed into Mrs. Alvarez's arms. Someone had dragged him clear. He was alive. Wren was not. The young servant lay near the shattered archway, eyes open to a sky he had likely never seen without fear. Grace turned her head and saw him. Something in her face changed. Not innocence lost. Grace had seen too much of the world for that. But a door closed somewhere. She understood then what I had always known. Kindness could enter war. It could even matter. But it did not make war gentle. Morrow was still breathing when they carried him inside. Barely. Stubbornness, apparently, was a medical condition. My soldiers gathered among the smoke, fewer than before, bloodied, silent, waiting to see whether I had won the battle or become the next thing they needed to fear. Grace stood beside me. Her hand found mine. The thorn mark burned through the cloth at her wrist, black and alive. I looked at Wren's body, then at the boy he had saved. No joke came, no clever remark, only the bitter weight of his name. Wren, I said. Grace's fingers tightened around mine. Far beyond the sealed gate, beneath the mountain and the battlefield and every grave hell had ever made, the Hollow King laughed softly, and the fortress bells began to toll for the dead.
The fortress bells tolled until I thought the sound would split my chest open. They tolled for soldiers, for servants, for the nameless dead at the broken gate. They tolled for Wren. Eli sat beside me in the healing hall with his blanket twisted in both hands. He had not stopped crying, only grown quiet with it. Across the room, Patrick stood over a table of maps, while a healer stitched the torn skin along his ribs. He did not flinch. He did not joke. That frightened me more than the blood. Morrow lay on a cot nearby, breathing through clenched teeth and looking deeply offended by mortality. You should be unconscious, Patrick told him. Morrow opened one eye. You first. Patrick's mouth twitched, but it did not become a smile. The black thorn on my wrist burned beneath its bandage. Every hour, it crept farther, curling like living ink over my brown skin. I pressed my thumb against it and felt something answer from far away. The next battle was already coming. I knew it the way I knew storms in my bones before rain ever touched the windows. I rose and crossed to Patrick. "Sit down," I said. "I am commanding. You are bleeding. I often do both." "Patrick, that did it. Not the wound. Not the war. My voice." He looked at me, and all the sharpness in him faltered. The healer tied off the last stitch and hurried away with the good sense of someone who knew when not to witness a private ruin. "I am tired," I said softly, "of being your fiancée." Patrick went very still. For one awful second I watched him misunderstand me. His face closed in layers, beautiful and terrible, a door locking from the inside. "I see," he said. "No." I stepped closer. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Put on the mask that smiles while it bleeds." His eyes flickered. I took his hand. His fingers were cold, stained with ash and blood no water had fully removed. "The contract made me your bride for hell's convenience," I said. "It made us a performance, then a strategy, then a target. I will not let parchment decide what we are." His breath changed. "Grace." "I choose you," I said. "Not because of the curse, not because of the shelter, not because hell is watching. I choose you because I love you, and I am done letting fear have the loudest voice in the room." He looked away as if my words had struck him somewhere too tender to touch. "I cannot ask you to marry me while hell is hunting you." "Then ask me as a man," I whispered, "not as a duke." The silence after that felt holy. Patrick lowered his head. When he looked at me again, there was no courtly arrogance left in him. No title, no monster polished into elegance. Only a wounded man who had once been human and had never stopped grieving it. "I have not been just a man for a very long time," he said. "I know. I may be very bad at it." "You are bad at many things." That surprised a broken laugh out of him. Then, slowly, as if he was afraid the floor might vanish beneath him, Patrick went down on one knee. Morrow made a faint sound from his cot. Patrick did not look at him. "If you die of sentiment, I will be furious." "I am merely observing," Morrow rasped. Patrick looked up at me. "Grace Holloway," he said, and my name in his mouth shook more than any vow I had ever heard. "I am Patrick Vale. I have enemies, ruins, a treason charge, and an alarming number of coats. I have no safe future to offer you, but every human thing left in me has already turned toward you." His fingers tightened around mine. "Will you marry me?" My eyes filled. "Yes," I said, "before dawn." His expression cracked. "Demanding woman. You proposed to one." "So I did." We returned to Mercy House through a door made of fire and trembling shadow. The church still smelled faintly of smoke from the attack through the basement. Salt lined the doors. Scripture had been taped to the windows in Mrs. Alvarez's careful handwriting. The children were supposed to be asleep, but every one of them seemed to be awake when we arrived. Tessa saw my face first, then Patrick's hand in mine. Then she gasped, "Are you getting married?" Patrick sighed. Apparently, secrecy has died with dignity. Within 20 minutes, the little church was full of whispers, bare feet, wrinkled pajamas, and children wrapped in blankets. Mrs. Alvarez pinned a ribbon in my hair with hands that trembled only once. Father Marcus stood at the altar in his old black shirt, eyes soft and solemn. Morrow arrived leaning on 2 soldiers and pure stubbornness. "You should be in bed," Patrick told him. "I brought myself to church to watch you become unbearable in a new way. Loyalty is wasted on you." The children lined the aisle with paper flowers Tessa had cut from old lesson sheets. Eli stood near the front, clutching something behind his back. I walked toward Patrick as dawn pressed faint blue light against the stained glass. He wore black because of course he did, but his coat was torn and his hands were bandaged. He looked less like a demon duke than a man who had survived the night and was not certain he deserved mourning. I loved him so much it hurt. Father Marcus looked between us. "You understand what you're asking?" "Yes," Patrick said. The priest's gaze lingered on him. "Not a bargain. No. Not a performance. No. Not a rescue." Patrick swallowed. "No." Father Marcus turned to me. I nodded. "A choice." So we made it. Patrick's voice was low when he said his vows. He did not use his title. He did not mention power, protection, or possession. "I, Patrick Vale," he said, "take you, Grace Holloway." And somehow that name, his human name, felt like the truest thing hell had failed to bury. When he slid the simple ring onto my finger, his hand shook. I covered his fingers with mine. After Father Marcus blessed us, Patrick kissed me gently at first, as if the whole room might shatter if he wanted too much. Then I rose on my toes and kissed him back, and the children burst into tears and applause. Patrick drew away with suspicious brightness in his eyes. "This amount of crying is excessive," he said. "We're happy," Eli told him. "A dangerous condition." Eli held up the paper he had been hiding. It was a drawing of a house, a big one, with too many windows and crooked flowers in front. I stood in the doorway. Patrick stood beside me, taller than anyone else, and dressed entirely in black crayon. Around us were children. So many children Eli had run out of space and drawn some in the sky. At the bottom, in uneven letters, he had written, "Our family." Patrick stared at it. For once, he had no words. He took the drawing with both hands, careful as if it were something breakable and sacred. "We will need to discuss the accuracy of my hair," he said finally, voice rough. Eli hugged his waist. Patrick froze. Then slowly he placed one bandaged hand on the boy's back. That night, there was no grand chamber, no infernal silk, no crown of fire, only a small guest room above Mercy House with clean sheets, a lamp on the table, and one paper flower Tessa had left in a chipped glass jar. Patrick stopped at the doorway. "You can sleep," he said. "I will keep watch." I turned to him. "No." His eyes searched mine. "I am not asking because I think I can save you," I said. "And you are not staying because you owe me tenderness." His breath caught. "You are my husband," I whispered. "Come here." He did. Slowly. Like trust was harder than battle. I touched him carefully, mindful of every wound, every scar, every place cruelty had taught him to expect pain. He asked before he kissed me, before he held me, before his hands settled at my waist. Each time I answered him, "Yes, yes, yes." There was no taking in the way he loved me. Only wonder. Only restraint trembling under devotion. Only Patrick Vale learning, piece by piece, that he could be wanted without being feared. And I chose him with my whole heart. Later, as dawn began to silver the window glass, I lay with his heartbeat beneath my cheek and his hand warm against my back. For one fragile hour, the war felt far away. Then, somewhere below us in the sleeping church, metal whispered softly against stone.
Metal whispered against the stone below us. I opened my eyes. For one blessed criminal moment, I did not move. Grace lay beside me in the narrow Mercy House bed, her cheek resting against my shoulder, her hand curled near my heart, as if she had decided in sleep to keep it there. Dawn touched the window. Her cross glinted on the table beside our rings. My wife. The words still felt impossible. Then the metal whispered again. Not a sword being drawn, not a knife dropped by some careless child in the kitchen. A blade waking. I reached for my coat without disturbing her. Grace stirred anyway. Of course she did. The woman could sleep through thunderstorms, but not through me attempting self-sacrifice in silence. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing." Her eyes opened fully. "Patrick," I sighed. A deeply inconvenient sound. She sat up, gathering the sheet around herself. The black thorn mark twisted along her wrist, darker than it had been before we slept. I hated it. I hated everything that dared write itself on her. "Stay here," I said. She gave me the look I had already learned meant I was about to lose an argument. "Grace." "I am coming. You are newly married. It is traditional to obey your husband for at least 6 minutes. It is also traditional for husbands not to lie before breakfast. Marriage has become oppressive with remarkable speed." But she was already reaching for her dress. Downstairs, Mercy House wore the fragile quiet of a place, pretending it had not been attacked twice in 1 week. The children were in the fellowship hall with Mrs. Alvarez, eating toast and eggs, as if normal life could be buttered and served warm. Father Marcus stood near the coffee urn, speaking softly to Morrow, who had no business being upright and seemed personally offended by chairs. Tessa saw us first. "You're awake," she said. "An accusation?" I asked. She shook her head and smiled, still sleepy. "You look married." "I have no idea what that means." Grace's hand slipped into mine. "It means happy." I had no reply to that. A terrible development. For perhaps 10 seconds, the world allowed it. Children eating. Mrs. Alvarez scolding someone for crumbs. Father Marcus pouring coffee into chipped mugs. Morrow watching the doors with a soldier's eyes while pretending he was not about to collapse. Then every candle in the church blew out. The basement door opened by itself. Father Marcus turned. I moved first. "Children behind me," I said. Grace was already ushering them toward the back hall. "Mrs. Alvarez, the pantry. Eli, take Tessa's hand. Nobody lets go." No panic, no wasted breath. My wife had been born with command in her bones. Something crawled up the basement stairs. Not shadow soldiers this time. Assassins, 6 of them. Demons, though barely. Their mouths had been sewn shut with black thorn thread. Their eyes burned with borrowed emptiness. Each wore a strip of funeral cloth across the chest, marked with the Hollow King's sigil. One carried no sword, only a knife. It was slender, bright, and cruelly clean, its edge shining with a cold light that made the air recoil. The handle had been wrapped in prayer beads and demon sinew. The blade hummed as it turned toward me. Morrow's voice cut across the room. "Saint Steel." My blood went still. The Vowbreaker blade. I had heard rumors of it centuries ago. A weapon forged from stolen altar nails, broken oaths, and curse metal dug from the roots of hell. It did not care much for demon flesh. It hunted the last human thing inside a monster. How thoughtful of them to bring a wedding gift. The assassins rushed. I did not kill the first 2, that should be noted. I broke one arm, shattered a knee, and threw a third through the basement door, hard enough to split the frame. But I did not spill blood near the altar. Not again. Not in this church. Grace had made too much sacred here for me to ruin it, because the Hollow King lacked manners. "Patrick!" Father Marcus shouted. The assassin with the knife vanished. A cheap trick. I felt him reappear behind me, but another attacker lunged for the children's hall, and I turned toward him. That was my mistake. Grace stood near the back, one arm around Eli, her dark eyes fixed on me. She had gotten the children clear. She was alive. She was looking at me with love and fear and furious trust. For one breath I looked back. For one breath I forgot the knife. Grace did not. Her eyes widened. "No," she said. She stepped between us. The Saint Steel knife went through her. The church fell silent. Not quiet. Silent. As if the world had stopped breathing. Grace looked down at the blade in her body with a strange, startled confusion. The assassin released the handle and stumbled back, as if he had not expected her to move. I caught her before she hit the floor. "No," I said. It was not a word. It was a command to reality. Reality disobeyed. Grace's blood spread beneath my hands, hot and terrible, soaking into her dress. Her brown fingers clutched weakly at my sleeve. No, no, no. I pressed my hand over the wound and called fire. Look at me. Her lashes fluttered. Grace, look at me. My power answered violently, flooding into my palms, gold and black and desperate. The wound opened wider. Grace gasped. Morrow seized my shoulder. Stop! It feeds on curse power. I tore the magic back with a sound that did not belong in any human throat. The blade had been meant for me. It had been made to carve out whatever human remnant Grace had married, but in her body, it hunted the bond between us. The thorn on her wrist writhed like a living thing, drinking pain. Father Marcus dropped beside us, pressing towels into my hands. Keep pressure here. I know how bleeding works, I snapped. Then do it. I did. My hands shook. I had ended kingdoms with steadier fingers. Grace's eyes found mine. She was trying to speak. No, I said immediately. Do not. Save your strength. That is an order from your husband, and I am suddenly very interested in tradition. Her mouth curved slightly. Even then, even with a cursed blade having torn through her, she lifted one trembling hand to my face. I leaned into it because I was weak, because I was hers, because if she wished to touch me while dying, then God himself would have to pry me away. You knew, she whispered. Grace. The way home once. The words struck somewhere old, somewhere buried. For half a second I smelled smoke that was not church smoke, heard a child crying in a hall beneath the world, saw a wooden lamb clutched in a small hand. Then Grace's hand slipped from my face. Her eyes closed. No. The lights went out. Every window in the church cracked at once. The remaining assassins froze. At last they understood. They had not angered a duke. They had not challenged a traitor. They had wounded my wife. I laid Grace carefully in Father Marcus's arms. Hold her, I said. Father Marcus did not argue. I stood. The sanctuary changed around me. Shadows bent inward. The floorboards groaned. The cross above the altar trembled, and I forced my rage away from it, away from the children, away from every innocent thing Grace loved. Then I turned it on the assassins. One tried to run. I closed the doors without touching them. The next drew a blade. I looked at him, and the blade melted in his hand. The one who had stabbed Grace fell to his knees. Thorn threads split across his sewn mouth, and the Hollow King's voice slipped through. She was always mine. I crossed the room slowly. No, I said. You only ever steal what braver souls have already loved. The assassin screamed when my shadow touched him. So did the others. I did not remember ending them. Only the sound of Mercy House shaking. Only the children crying behind the pantry door. Only Grace on the floor, not moving. Only Father Marcus saying my name like he feared I might follow my wrath too far to return. Then Morrow was there, bleeding through his bandages, gripping my arm. Your Grace, he said. Patrick. My name again. Grace's favorite weapon. I turned. Father Marcus had Grace gathered against him, one hand pressed to her wound. Mrs. Alvarez was on the phone, voice breaking as she begged for an ambulance. An ambulance, human medicine, needles, machines, doctors with tired eyes and no knowledge of curse metal. Useless, fragile, mortal things. The only things left. I went to Grace and lifted her into my arms. Her head rested against my chest. Her body was warm, but something in her felt far away already, slipping beyond any door I knew how to open. Father Marcus met my eyes. Go, he said. For once I did not make a joke. I carried my wife out of the broken church and into the morning. Behind us, the first siren began to wail. I had heard war horns, death bells, the screaming gates of hell when armies passed through them. Nothing had ever sounded so useless as that siren. Grace lay in my arms, her blood soaking through my shirt, her head resting against my chest, as if she had only fallen asleep there. I kept one hand pressed to the wound because Father Marcus had told me to, and because if I stopped doing something, anything, I might have torn the world open in the street. The ambulance doors flew wide. Humans shouted. Hands reached for her. I pulled back on instinct, and every light along Mercy House flickered. Father Marcus stepped in front of me. Patrick, they will not know what to do. No, he said quietly, but they will try. That was the cruelty of it. Trying was all I had left, so I let them take my wife from my arms. The hospital smelled of bleach, metal, burnt coffee, and fear disguised as professionalism. They rushed Grace through doors I was not allowed to enter. A nurse put a hand against my chest to stop me. I looked at her hand. She removed it. Sir, you need to wait here. I am her husband. I understand. No, she did not. No one in that building understood anything. Not the doctors calling for blood. Not the machines shrieking in their clean little language. Not the security guard who watched me as if I were a threat. He was not wrong. Mrs. Alvarez sat in the waiting room with her rosary wrapped around both hands. Father Marcus stood beside the vending machines, still wearing Grace's blood on his sleeves. Morrow arrived an hour later against direct orders, leaning on a cane and hatred. You should be resting, I said. So should you. I am not wounded. Morrow looked at the blood drying black on my hands. No. I had no clever answer. A surgeon came out after 3 hours, then another doctor, then a woman with kind eyes and the voice humans use when they have bad news wrapped in cotton. She survived the surgery, she said. The room tilted. But? Father Marcus asked. The doctor hesitated. The wound was unusual. We repaired the physical damage as best we could, but she isn't waking. Her body is stable for now, but there are things we can't explain. I could. Saint Steel, Vowbreaker. A blade made to kill the last human part of me, now buried in the woman who had married it. Take me to her, I said. They did. Grace lay beneath white blankets in a private room, because Morrow had threatened someone, bribed someone, or both. Machines blinked beside her. Tubes and wires tethered her to the world with an arrogance I resented and needed. Her face was still, too still. Grace was never still. Even in sleep she reached for warmth, tucked her hand beneath her cheek, frowned at dreams like she meant to correct them. Now she did not move at all. I sat beside her bed. That was day 1. On day 2, the children came. Mrs. Alvarez tried to keep them away, but Grace had taught them to love honestly, which made them impossible to manage. They filed into the room, in terrible silence, carrying drawings, paper flowers, and one stuffed rabbit with a missing ear. Tessa placed her drawing by Grace's pillow. It showed Grace in a yellow dress beneath a black tree. Around the tree were tiny crosses drawn in red crayon. I made the tree scared of her, Tessa whispered. A wise artistic choice, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Eli climbed into the chair beside me and put a drawing in my lap. It was the family house again. More windows this time, more children. Grace stood in the doorway. I stood beside her, black from head to foot, with large horns and a frown. You made me look unpleasant, I said. You are unpleasant. Yes, but usually with elegance. He leaned against my arm and began to cry. I let him. I did not sleep that night, or the next. On day 4, a nurse told me I had to leave while they checked Grace. I smiled at her. Morrow from the corner said, I advise against insisting. The nurse looked between us. and decided medicine could survive my presence. On day 5, Vespera sent a message sealed in black wax. The Hollow King is searching for the knife's work. Do not bring her below. I burned the letter after reading it twice. On day 6, Grace's hand grew colder in mine. Not dead, not gone, but farther. I could feel the difference. There were doors between worlds, and I had opened most of them at one point or another. Grace was behind one I could not see. Her body remained in the bed, breathing because machines demanded it. But the truest part of her had slipped somewhere the doctors had no name for. That night, Father Marcus found me in the hospital chapel. I had not meant to go there. One moment I was walking the corridor outside Grace's room. The next I was sitting in the back pew beneath a small wooden cross, my elbows on my knees, my hands clasped hard enough to hurt. I was not praying. Not exactly. I did not know if men like me were allowed to ask heaven for anything, after all I had done with hell's gifts. Father Marcus sat beside me without speaking. For once, I wished he would condemn me. It would have been simpler, familiar. Instead, he said, "You can be angry and still pray." I am not angry at him. Then who? I looked toward the chapel doors, toward the hallway, toward the room where Grace lay silent because she had stepped in front of a blade meant for me. Myself. Father Marcus bowed his head. I looked at her, I said. That is all it took, one moment. I looked at her because she was alive and beautiful, and mine, and I forgot there was a knife in the room. You did not stab her. No, I merely gave her the opening to save me. She is very consistent that way. My voice broke on the last word. I despised it. Father Marcus did not look away. On day 8, the doctors gathered in Grace's room. They used gentle words. No meaningful response. No sign of waking. Prepare yourselves. No hope. Humans were extraordinary creatures. They could destroy a man with softness. Mrs. Alvarez covered her mouth. Morrow closed his eyes. Father Marcus looked at me, waiting for the explosion. It did not come. I stood very still beside Grace's bed. Too still, perhaps. Thank you, I said. The doctor blinked. Mr. Vale, leave us. Something in my voice emptied the room. That night the hospital corridors dimmed. Rain tapped against the windows. The children had been taken back to Mercy House. Morrow had fallen asleep in a chair outside despite himself. Father Marcus remained somewhere nearby. He always did. I bent over Grace and kissed her forehead. Her skin was warm beneath my lips. You are going to be furious with me, I whispered. I recommend waking up quickly so you may express yourself. She did not answer. I unwound her from the machines as gently as I had once untied prayer ribbons from a battlefield altar. The monitors protested. I silenced them. The room filled with a quiet so deep it felt like the breath before judgment. Then I lifted my wife into my arms. She weighed almost nothing. That frightened me more than armies. I carried her into the hallway. Father Marcus was waiting at the end of it. For a moment I thought he would stop me. He stood between me and the exit with his old priest's collar, tired eyes, and hands that had blessed our marriage less than 10 days before. His gaze dropped to Grace. Then back to me. Bring her back, he said. I held her closer. I will tear open death if I have to. Father Marcus stepped aside. He did not bless me. He did not stop me. He only stood in that hospital hallway, with rain tapping against the windows and grief carved into the tired lines of his face. Bring her back, he said again. I held Grace closer. I intend to be very difficult until she is returned. It was a poor joke. No one laughed. I carried my wife past the nurse's station, while alarms began protesting from her empty room. Human voices rose behind us. Footsteps, questions, fear. I ignored all of it. Outside, the rain had turned the hospital entrance silver and black. Grace did not stir in my arms. Her head rested against my chest, her braids dampening beneath the night air, one brown hand fallen against the torn front of my shirt. The thorn mark on her wrist curled deeper, like ink searching for a vein. I did not open a gate to hell. Hell had roads, hell had laws, hell had ears, and the Hollow King knew too many of them. So I walked into the narrow alley beside the hospital and turned toward a brick wall slick with rain. A rusted service door waited there, locked from the inside. It had no magic in it, no ancient sigil, no infernal hinge. That was the point. The greatest doors are the ones no tyrant thinks to watch. I pressed my bloodied hand against the metal. "Open," I said. The door breathed. Then it became something else. Not fire, not shadow, not the red wound of an underworld gate. A quiet gold seam split the air, thin as a held breath. I stepped through with Grace in my arms and left the human world behind. The quiet between received us in silence. It always did. There was no sun there, but there was light, soft and directionless, as if morning had been poured through water. Hills rolled under silver-green grass. Small houses were built into the sides of them, their round windows glowing warmly. A river moved without sound beneath bridges made from old church beams, demon bone, and human stubbornness. Not earth, not hell, not heaven. A place I had stolen from the spaces in between. The first time I found it, it had been nothing but a forgotten threshold, a breath between doors. I had been younger then, crueler in easier ways, still angry enough to pretend every mercy was strategy. One frightened seer had needed somewhere to hide. Then a healer. Then 3 children born with voices that could open graves. Then demons who refused to enjoy cruelty, and humans the underworld wanted to sharpen into weapons. Centuries later, I had a village, a sanctuary. A secret so well kept even my enemies believed the people inside it were dead, escaped, or useless. I had never brought Grace here, not because I did not trust her, because anything I loved became a map for those who wanted to hurt me. I had been correct. That did not make it feel better. The gate bell rang once. Doors opened across the hillside. People emerged into the soft light. A woman with bark brown skin and white spirals tattooed along her throat. A demon boy with one broken horn and an arm full of laundry. 2 elderly twins who saw slightly into tomorrow and argued constantly about what they saw there. A blind man lifted his face toward me from the bridge. "Patrick," he called. My throat tightened. "Not now, Oren." That was when they saw Grace. The village stilled. A small girl ran down the hill barefoot, silver eyes shining like moonlit glass. Her name was Leora. The crown had once ordered her eyes cut out because they could see hidden gates. I had replaced the executioner with a convincing corpse and brought her here wrapped in my cloak. She stopped before me and stared at Grace with heartbreaking seriousness. "Is she the one who made you smile?" I nearly dropped to my knees. Instead I said, "That accusation remains unproven." "You did," Leora whispered. "Once, when her letter came." I had forgotten children were terrible witnesses. A healer pushed through the gathering. Sable was older than most kingdoms, and twice as unpleasant before tea. Her grey hair was braided down her back, and her hands shone faintly with blue-white light. "What happened?" she demanded. "Saint Steel," I said. Her expression changed. That frightened me. Sable was not easily frightened. "Bring her to the hall." The healing hall had been built from every tradition hell mocked. Clean linen, warm lamps, bowls of salt, psalms written beside warding marks. Demon charms hung next to wooden crosses, because survival had never cared much for tidy theology. I laid Grace on the central bed. For one unbearable moment, my hands would not leave her. Sable looked at me. Move, Patrick. I hated her. I obeyed. Healers came from every corner of the sanctuary. Some human, some demon, some neither in any way the world had language for. They cut away the hospital bandages. The wound itself had been stitched, repaired, made medically respectable. A useless disguise. The real damage lived beneath. The thorn on Grace's wrist twisted as Sable passed a hand over it. The lamps dimmed. She is bound to the curse, Sable said. I know. No, she said sharply. You do not. The blade did not only strike her body, it struck the vow between you. It followed the bond into her soul. I gripped the bedpost until the wood cracked. Then follow it back. We are trying. They tried. God help me, they tried. One healer sang in a language older than the seventh circle. Another placed both hands over Grace's heart and poured light into her until blood ran from his nose. A child no older than 12 pressed her glowing palms to Grace's wrist and wept when the thorn burned her fingers. Sable drew the Saint Steel's poison out in thin black threads that writhed in a silver basin and whispered my name. Grace did not wake. Her chest rose, her pulse remained. But she was not there. I knew it in the same sick way I had known when hell's doors closed behind the innocent. The room filled with the people I had hidden from the world. They did not look at me the way the court did. No hunger, no fear polished into obedience. Only grief, concern, trust. It was unbearable. You should not all be standing here, I said. No one moved. Excellent. A sanctuary full of rebels. How inconvenient for the man who made it. Orin, the blind seer, came to the foot of Grace's bed. You saved us from being used. I hid useful people from my enemies. Still lying after all these centuries. I am consistent. No, he said softly. You are loved. I looked away from him so quickly, it was almost violence. A woman entered then, quiet as sleep. Illyra, our strongest dream walker. Her hair drifted around her shoulders as if under water, though there was no wind in the room. She had not spoken aloud in 30 years, unless the matter involved death. Apparently we had qualified. She is between, Illyra said. Every healer went still. I stepped closer. Between what? Life and death, memory and body. The blade severed the path, but not completely. Something is holding her spirit in the threshold. The Hollow King, Sibel murmured. My vision darkened at the edges. Illyra nodded. He cannot claim her body here, not yet. But her soul is caught where his roots can reach. If she stays there, she will forget how to return. No. The word left me calmly. That calm made several people step back. Illyra turned her strange, sleep-filled eyes on me. Someone must reach her from within the between place. Someone bound deeply enough to find her. I will go. Sibel swore. Of course you will. Let the warning finish before you volunteer for disaster. I dislike suspense. If you enter that threshold, the Hollow King may trap you as well, Illyra said. Your curse is tied to his realm. He will feel you the moment you cross. He may use your own darkness to keep you there. I looked at Grace. My wife lay quiet beneath the lamplight. Farther from me than death should have been allowed to take her. I touched her hand carefully, avoiding the thorn. Her fingers did not curl around mine. That nearly ended me. Patrick, Sibel said, and there was no sharpness in her voice now. If you are trapped, we may not be able to retrieve either of you. I bent and pressed my lips to Grace's knuckles. Then I looked at the Dreamwalker. Then I will be trapped where she is.
I woke to the sound of Mercy House breathing. At first that comforted me. The old building always had its own kind of life. pipes knocking in winter, floorboards sighing beneath small feet, someone crying in a corner and someone else laughing too loudly in the kitchen, Mrs. Alvarez singing hymns under her breath while burning toast she would later blame on the toaster. But this Mercy house was quiet. Too quiet. I sat up on a narrow cot in the girls' room, but the sheets were cold beneath my hands. No children slept around me. No stuffed animals crowded the beds. No crayon drawings hung crooked on the walls. The hallway outside stretched farther than it should have. "Hello?" I called. My voice came back softer, like the building had swallowed it first. I put my hand to my chest. No hospital gown, no bandages, no blood. My cross necklace rested against my skin. The thorn mark on my wrist was there too, black and curled tight, pulsing once beneath my gaze. Then I remembered the knife. Patrick's face, the church going silent, the way his voice had broken when he told me to look at him. "Patrick," I whispered. No answer. I stood carefully and walked into the hall. Mercy House had become a place made of memory. Doors I knew opened into rooms I did not. The chapel door led into the shelter kitchen. The kitchen door led to the basement stairs. The stairs led back to the same hallway, longer every time, lined with old photographs that had never existed. Children's faces watched me from the frames. Some I knew, some I had not met yet. Some, somehow, I had lost before I was even born. At the end of the hall, a woman stood with her back to me. My breath caught. She wore a brown coat with one missing button. Her hair was wrapped in a faded scarf. Her shoulders shook like she was trying not to cry. I knew her before she turned. Mama. I had not let myself call her that in years. Not out loud. I was small again when I saw her. 4 years old, maybe 5. My shoes were too tight. My coat sleeves came past my wrists. I was standing outside Mercy House on a rainy night, with one hand clutching the iron fence. My mother knelt before me. Her face was thinner than I remembered. Not careless. Not cold. Terrified. "Stay here, baby," she whispered. I felt the old hurt rise in me, sharp as if no years had passed at all. "You left me," I said. The little girl I had been did not say it. The woman I had become did. My mother looked straight at me, and somehow she saw both. "I know. You never came back." I tried. The street behind her flickered. For a moment it was not only rain and headlights, it was shadow moving wrong against brick walls, branches with no trees, a crown-shaped darkness stretching over the road. My mother pressed a hand to her ribs. Blood darkened her sleeve. I had never remembered that. "I thought you didn't want me," I said, and my voice sounded younger than it should have. "I thought I was too much." Her face crumpled. "Oh, Grace." She touched my cheek with shaking fingers. "I did not leave because I did not love you. I left because I did." The words entered me like breath after drowning. She looked toward the church doors. There are places darkness hesitates to enter. I knew they would take you in here. I knew someone would put food in your hands and a blanket over you. I knew God would see you, even if I couldn't stay. The little girl at the fence began to cry. So did I. All these years, I had built my life out of that doorway. Every child I tucked into bed. Every runaway I fed. Every small hand I held through nightmares. I had thought I was answering their pain. Maybe I had been answering mine too. I had been saving abandoned children because some part of me was still waiting on the steps, hoping someone would come back and say I had not been thrown away. My mother leaned close and kissed my forehead. "You were never unwanted," she whispered. "You were hidden." The word struck something deep. Hidden. The hallway trembled. The rain outside the memory turned black. My mother looked over my shoulder, fear returning to her eyes. "He is looking for you again." Who? But I already knew. The walls of Mercy House split apart like wet paper. The hallway became stone. Ancient stone, black and veined with red light. The air tasted of smoke, iron, and old screams. I stood beneath arches so high their tops vanished into darkness. Chains hung from the ceiling, but some had been broken. Far away, something enormous breathed beneath the world. Hell. Not Patrick's court. Not the glittering cruelty of noble halls. Older than that. Hungrier. I looked down and saw small hands. A child's hands. Brown, scraped at the knuckles, clutching a wooden lamb so tightly, one of its little carved legs had cracked. I was not Grace. I was a boy, 6 years old, maybe younger, one front tooth missing, bare feet bruised from running. My throat hurt from crying, but I was too scared to make another sound. The knowledge did not come like a thought. It came like remembering my own name. I had been him, before Grace Holloway, before Mercy House, before the mother who loved me enough to leave me where holy doors might keep me safe. I had been a frightened little boy in hell with a wooden lamb in my hands. A shadow moved at the end of the hall, the Hollow King. He did not walk. The darkness arranged itself into him, tall, crowned in thorns that were not plants but wounds. His face was a hollow beneath the crown, and inside that hollow lived every voice that had ever told a child no one was coming. "There you are," he said. The little boy pressed back against the wall. I felt his terror as my own. The Hollow King reached toward him. "Such a rare soul. Do you know what you are, little gate? Do you know what opens when you cry?" The stone beneath the boy's feet shimmered. Light leaked through cracks around him. Not hellfire, not shadow. Light. The kind that did not belong there. A soul that could open gates between darkness and light. That was why he wanted me. Not because I was good, because I was a door. The Hollow King's hand descended. Then another shadow crossed the hall. This one moved like a blade. Patrick. Not as I knew him. Not the proud duke wrapped in black elegance and sarcasm. He was younger here, though I did not know how demons aged. His power sat on him like armor he had not yet learned to carry. His eyes burned gold, but beneath the fire was something painfully human. Anger. Fear. Mercy he had not yet killed. The Hollow King turned. "You were not summoned." Patrick's mouth curved, but there was no humor in it. "And yet I bring my charm wherever I go. You know what that child is." "Yes." "Then bring him to me." For one terrible second, Patrick looked at the boy. I felt him deciding. I felt the weight of hell pressing on him. The command. The consequence. The easy path. Then the boy lifted the wooden lamb with shaking hands and asked, "Do you know the way home?" Patrick's face changed. "Not much. Enough." "Yes," he said. The word was quiet. A vow before either of us knew what vows would cost. He crossed the hall, lifted the boy into his arms, and turned his back on the Hollow King. The world screamed. The memory shattered into fire and thorns. I saw Patrick running through doors that closed like teeth, saw the boy clinging to his neck, saw light opening where darkness tried to seal it. Then I saw the curse. Black thorns striking Patrick's heart, the Hollow King's voice pouring into his mind. "Not this one. Never this one. Forget the gate. Forget the soul. Let mercy become a story harmless enough to survive. A little girl. A name. Miriam. Patrick's most precious memory, rewritten into a lie. I staggered back, no longer a child. No longer in Mercy House. No longer anywhere with walls. The truth stood around me like fire. Patrick had not been cursed because he failed to be cruel. He had been cursed because he saved me. Not Miriam. Me. The Hollow King had hidden my own soul from him, hid him from me, and waited for the day the gate would love the cursed man enough to open again. The thorn on my wrist burned. A voice whispered from the dark, "Stay lost, Grace Holloway. I held my cross in one hand and the memory of the wooden lamb in the other. No, I said. Somewhere far away, someone was calling my name like it was the only prayer he knew. Patrick. I turned toward his voice, and for the second time in all my lives, I began looking for the way home.
I called her name until language stopped meaning anything. Grace. At first it was a word, then a plea, then a wound. I sat beside her bed in the healing hall with Elira's hands pressed to my temples and a silver thread of dreamlight tied around my wrist. The thread vanished into the air above Grace's heart, trembling whenever I spoke. Sable stood nearby with a basin of salt water, muttering threats at every power known to heaven, hell, and irresponsible medicine. "She can hear you," Elira whispered. "She is not answering. Keep calling." So I did. I called her name through darkness I could not enter. I felt the threshold around her like a locked door with no handle. Once I saw the Mercy House reflected in the silver thread, then black stone, then a child's wooden lamb turning slowly in the dark. My chest seized. "Miriam," I whispered. The thread snapped hot against my wrist. Grace's fingers moved. Every creature in the room went still. I stopped breathing. Her hand shifted against the blanket, slow and uncertain. Her brown fingers curled once, as if reaching for something she had dropped. "Grace," I said. Her lashes trembled. Sable stepped closer. "Careful." I could have laughed. I could have broken the world. I did neither. Grace opened her eyes. For a moment she stared at nothing. Not at the ceiling, not at me. Somewhere past all of us, as if she was still finding her way through a door only she could see. Then her gaze turned, found mine. I had prepared for many things in my long and revolting life. Wars, betrayals, assassinations, curses. The tedious persistence of noblemen with decorative opinions. I had not prepared for my wife looking at me after death had tried to keep her. Her lips parted. "You said yes." The words struck me harder than any blade. I did not move. Grace swallowed, her voice dry and faint. "I asked if you knew the way home." The healing hall vanished. Not truly. I remained there. I knew I did because Sabelle swore softly and someone dropped a glass behind me. But another place opened inside my skull. A hall of black stone, chains hanging from impossible heights, the smell of smoke, iron and terror. And a child. Not Miriam. Not the little girl I had carried in memory for centuries, like a holy relic buried under rot. A boy, 6 years old, brown skin streaked with soot, one front tooth missing, bare feet bleeding against the stone. His small hands clutched a wooden lamb so tightly the toy had cracked. He looked at me with the terrible trust only desperate children can give. "Do you know the way home?" I remembered. God help me, I remembered everything. The Hollow King's command. Bring him to me. The weight of hell watching. The simple, easy brutality expected of me. How little it would have cost to obey. How much it cost not to. I had looked at that child and seen not a weapon, not a gate, not an object of royal hunger. A child. So I said yes. I had lifted him into my arms. He had clung to my neck, shaking so hard his teeth clicked together. I had wrapped my cloak around his small body and run while the Hollow King's rage tore open the stones behind us. Doors slammed shut like jaws. I broke them. Hands rose from the floor. I burned them. The child buried his face against my shoulder and whispered, "Please." I had not known I could hate hell more than I already did until that moment. Then came the curse. Black thorns through my chest. A crownless king screaming into my blood. If you love mercy so deeply, let mercy ruin you. And then the lie. The boy became a girl in my mind. The lamb became a ribbon. His terror became a gentle story about Miriam, a human child I had failed to save cleanly, but remembered safely enough. Harmlessly enough. The Hollow King had not only cursed me, he had reached into the one mercy I had not regretted, and rewritten it until I could no longer recognize the soul I had saved. I staggered back from Grace's bed. No. Grace tried to lift her hand. I backed away farther. No, I said again, because apparently I had become eloquent in catastrophe. Morrow caught my arm. I nearly turned on him. He let go at once. Patrick, Grace whispered. I looked at her, and the truth arranged itself with unbearable cruelty. The child, the gate soul, the curse, Grace. The Hollow King had lost her once because I had carried her out of hell, so he had hidden her from me, hidden me from myself. Let her be born again, wounded again, left at church doors, hunted by shadows she could not name. Then he had waited until I loved her, until the gate opened willingly. I pressed a hand to my mouth as if that might keep the sound inside me. It did not. You suffered because of me. Grace's brow tightened. No. I brought you into his reach. You carried me out of it. You died. I am currently objecting to that accusation. That almost broke a laugh out of me. It came out as something worse. Grace pushed herself upright. Sable immediately exploded. Absolutely not. My wife, who had been unconscious for more than a week and spiritually misplaced, ignored one of the most terrifying healers alive with the serenity of a woman accustomed to managing children, demons, and me. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Grace, I warned, do not use that voice with me. I have several voices. Be specific. The one where you pretend fear is authority. I had no defense against that, which was rude of her. She stood. For half a breath, she managed it. Then her strength failed. I crossed the room before thought caught up with me and caught her against my chest. Her body was warm, alive. Frail from the wound, yes. Trembling, but alive. My arms closed around her with such force that Sable made a sharp sound of protest. Grace's hand found the front of my shirt. No, she said against me. Listen to me. I am listening. You are holding me like you plan to argue with God if he asks for me back. I have several remarks prepared. She leaned back enough to look at me. Her eyes shone with exhaustion and unbearable tenderness. I lived because of you, she said. Not suffered, lived. I grew up. I found Mercy House. I found the children. I found you again. I shook my head. Patrick. The way she said my name ruined me more gently than any curse. You saved me before you loved me, she whispered. Before you knew me. Before I could give you anything. That was you. The first tear fell before I could stop it. Then another. I hated them. Grace did not. She lifted one shaking hand and touched my face, her thumb brushing the wetness from my cheek, as if I was something precious and not the wreckage of a man hell had chewed on for centuries. I do not know how to be forgiven for this, I said. Then be loved until you learn. I bent my head and kissed her. It was not elegant. Nothing about grief returning to joy is elegant. It was desperate and uneven. Salt and breath and trembling hands. I kissed her as if I could give back every year stolen from her. She kissed me as if she had already decided I was worth surviving. When I finally drew back, my forehead rested against hers. I remember you, I whispered. Grace closed her eyes. All of you. Her fingers tightened in my shirt. The thorn mark on her wrist stirred between us. For the first time it did not tighten. One black curl loosened. Across the quiet between, the gate bell rang. Once, then again. then a third time. Sable turned toward the doors of the healing hall. Morrow's hand went to his blade. Grace looked at me, and I knew from the sorrow in her eyes that she understood before anyone spoke. The Hollow King had heard her come home.
Author's point of view.
The third bell did not fade. It broke. The sound cracked over the quiet between and sent every window in the healing hall trembling. Lamps swung from the rafters. Bowls of salt water rippled. Somewhere outside, a child screamed. Patrick turned toward the doors before anyone else moved. Grace was still in his arms. For one small impossible moment, he held her tighter, as if the warmth might be persuaded to wait because she had only just come back to him. It did not. The floor beneath them shuddered. Sable swore and reached for Grace. Put her down. No, Patrick said. Grace lifted her head from his chest. Her voice was weak, but the command in it was not. Patrick. He looked at her. That was all it took. With a sound that was almost a growl, he set her carefully on the edge of the healing bed. Stay here. Grace gave him a look that would have humbled kings, saints, and stubborn former dukes. Patrick pointed at her. That expression is illegal in at least 4 courts. Then arrest me later. Before he could answer, the doors burst open. Leora stood there, silver eyes wide, one hand gripping the frame. They found us, she whispered. Behind her, the sanctuary was changing. The soft green hills of the quiet between had split open. Black roots pushed up through the grass, thick as serpents and wet with shadow. The little houses built into the hillsides shook as something vast pressed against the realm from beneath. The river, which had never made a sound, began to scream. Out of the broken earth came soldiers, not demons of any court, not living things in any honest sense. They wore armor made of bark, bone, and old grief. Crowns of thorns grew through their helmets. Their faces were smooth hollows except for mouths that opened too wide. The Hollow King's army had come to the hidden. Patrick stepped outside. The air darkened around him. For centuries, the quiet between had known him as protector, rescuer, secret keeper. Now every creature in the village saw what hell had once made of him. Horns shadowed beneath his hair, gold burned in his eyes, darkness gathered at his hands like obedient wolves. The Hollow King's voice rolled across the hills. Pretty little refuge. The roots tightened around the houses. Did you think mercy could hide forever? Patrick smiled. It was the kind of smile that made ancient things reconsider their plans. I had hoped you would arrive ugly, he called back. It saves me the trouble of being diplomatic. The first wave charged. Patrick met them at the bridge. The collision shook the sanctuary. Grace pushed herself upright inside the healing hall. Sable planted both hands on her shoulders. If you stand, I will personally sedate you. If you sedate me, Grace said, breathing through the pain, I will wake up annoyed. You were stabbed through the soul, and I am very upset about it. Now move. Sable did not move. Then a young demon boy stumbled through the doorway carrying a toddler with silver burns across her arms. Behind him came 3 more children crying and an elderly woman with blood in her hair. Grace looked at them. Something in her face settled. Not softness, purpose. Sable, she said, I need bandages by the north wall, water at every bed, and anyone who can walk sent to the lower tunnels. Sable stared at her. Grace looked back. I have run Mercy House during flu season, eviction week, and a pipe burst in January. Do not make me repeat myself. After one sharp breath, Sable turned. You heard her. Move! The healing hall became a shelter. Grace stood only because 2 frightened children were watching. She tore linen into strips, pointed the wounded toward beds, sent the strongest to carry the weakest, and ordered Leora to find every hidden seam in the realm. Leora wiped her cheeks. I can see 3. Good, Grace said. Show Oren. The blind seer had already reached the center of the hall, his sightless eyes turned toward places no one else could see. He lifted both hands. Doors opened in the air. One showed a stone crypt beneath a human chapel. Another opened into a moonlit orchard. A third showed a cellar lined with jars of peaches and old warding marks. Oren's voice shook, but it held. Children first, wounded next. No one carries more than they can hold in two hands. Outside, Patrick tore through the Hollow King's soldiers with terrifying grace. He did not fight like a man trying to survive. He fought like something punishing the world for daring to touch what he loved. Morrow fought at his left, blade flashing. Elira stood on the hill above them, hair drifting around her face as she opened her mouth and sang without sound. A dozen invaders stopped mid-charge. Their bodies remained standing, but their minds fell elsewhere, into nightmares. One clawed at his own helmet, sobbing. Another dropped his weapon and begged forgiveness from someone only he could see. Elira's dreamwork folded around them like invisible chains. Then the roots struck. A black spear erupted from the ground and drove through Morrow's side. He fell without a sound. Patrick saw. The battlefield changed. The darkness at his hands surged up his arms, over his shoulders, into the air behind him. It formed wings that were not wings, a crown that was not a crown. His face went still in a way that was worse than rage. The Hollow King whispered through every root, "There you are." Patrick lifted one hand. Every shadow on the bridge bent toward him. "My beautiful ruined boy." Grace felt the words through the thorn on her wrist. They hurt like hooks. "No," she breathed. She moved before Sabel could stop her. Her legs nearly failed at the doorway, but Leora appeared beneath one arm, small and fierce. "I have you," the child said. Grace leaned on her and looked across the battlefield. Patrick was no longer merely killing the soldiers in front of him. He was unmaking them, tearing shadow from shadow, splitting the ground beneath their feet. The quiet between itself trembled under the force of him. If he kept going, he would win, and something human in him would not return. "Patrick!" Grace shouted. He did not hear, or he heard and could not answer. Morrow bled on the bridge. A child healer named Nima threw herself beside him, pressing both little hands to the wound. Light burst from her palms. She screamed as the curse burned her skin, but she did not let go. Morrow gasped, lived. Grace took one step forward. The thorn on her wrist flared black. "Patrick Vale!" This time his head turned. Across smoke, roots, broken stone, and war he found her. Grace did not plead. She did not soften the truth. "Come back," she said, loud enough for the battlefield to hear. "Or he wins." Patrick froze. The shadows around him writhed, hungry and confused. Then slowly his hand closed into a fist. The darkness broke, not vanished, never that easily, but it fell back under his skin, snarling as it went. Patrick turned from Grace to the bridge. His expression became calm, dangerously calm. "Everyone off the North Ridge," he ordered. Morrow, barely conscious, looked up. "My lord, now!" Oren opened the largest gate yet, a wide gold seam that trembled under the strain. Survivors poured through it. Demons who had once refused cruelty carried human children. Seers guided the blind. The wounded dragged the wounded. Patrick waited until the last group crossed the bridge. Then he drove both hands into the ground. The North Ridge collapsed. Earth, roots, soldiers, and shadow fell into a chasm of white fire beneath the sanctuary. The Hollow King's army shrieked as the breach sealed over them. The quiet between went still, not peaceful. Never that again. The hidden realm had survived, but it was no longer whole. Houses burned without flame. The river whispered brokenly beneath the bridge. The gate bell lay split in the grass. The hidden were hidden no longer. By the time Patrick returned to the healing hall, Grace was sitting on the floor with a list of names in her lap, refusing to rest until every child had been counted. He crouched before her. "You are bleeding again," he said. "So are you." "I am more decorative when wounded." She gave him a tired look. "Do not make jokes because you are scared. I make jokes because I am charming." Patrick. His smile disappeared. For one moment, the war fell away from his face, and there was only the man who had nearly lost her once and had not survived it well. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers. "I am here," he said. Grace searched his eyes. "Are you?" He did not answer quickly enough. Sibel swept in then and ordered Grace back to bed with such authority that even Patrick stepped aside. Grace let herself be helped up, but her gaze stayed on him. "Do not make plans without me," she said. Patrick's mouth curved faintly. "Would I do something so offensive?" "Yes." He kissed her forehead. "Rest," he whispered. Later, when Grace finally slept under Sable's watch, Patrick stood outside among the broken hills with Morrow beside him, bandaged and barely upright. Morrow looked at the ruined sanctuary. She will know. Eventually. She will follow. Patrick's eyes remained on the sealed chasm. Then I will have to leave before she can. Morrow was quiet for a long moment. "This is not strategy," he said at last. "It is punishment." Patrick's jaw tightened. Below them, the last of the black roots twitched in the wounded earth. "As long as his curse lives in me," Patrick said, "every place I love becomes a map." He turned away from the healing hall, from Grace, from the people he had hidden for centuries. And before dawn touched any world that still believed in mourning, Patrick began planning the one war his wife would never allow him to fight alone.
There are few indignities greater than preparing one's own death while filling out human paperwork. Hell, for all its many flaws, never once required me to provide proof of residence. I sat in the ruined library of the Quiet Between, with a cracked fountain pen, 3 legal names, 6 false trusts, and a stack of documents thick enough to bludgeon a minor nobleman. Outside, the wounded sanctuary groaned in its sleep. Inside, I signed away everything I had ever stolen, earned, extorted, inherited, or hidden. To Grace, to the children, to Mercy House, to a future I had no intention of entering. Morrow stood near the window, bandaged from ribs to hip, looking inconveniently alive and inconveniently disapproving. "If you sigh again," I said without looking up, "I shall assume your lung has collapsed and summon Sable." I did not sigh. You radiated judgment. It is acoustically similar. You are arranging your estate. I am organizing resources. You are writing instructions for after your death. Efficient instructions. Morrow said nothing. That was worse. I pressed the pen harder against the paper. The nib snapped. Ink spread over the adoption petition for Tessa Marie Alvarez Holloway. I stared at the black stain until the letters blurred. Tessa's name should not have been anywhere near war. None of their names should have. Eli, June, Samuel, Rose, Mateo, little Hannah, who still hid crackers in pillowcases because hunger had trained her better than any adult had loved her. I had signed papers for each of them. Guardianship transfers, trusts, medical permissions, school records, adoption filings carefully prepared through 3 attorneys who believed they served an eccentric widower in advance of surgery. I had built a life for Grace with the precision of a man constructing a coffin from the inside. "You will give these to Father Marcus," I said. Morrow's jaw tightened. "No. How charming. Treason has made you sentimental. I will not help you do this. You have helped me do much worse." "Yes," he said quietly. "That is why I know what this is." My hand stilled. Outside, a child laughed somewhere among the broken houses. The sound cut deeper than any blade. I gathered the papers into a leather folder and tied them with red cord. Mercy House has 3 wards now. 1 human, 1 infernal, 1 older than both. If the crown approaches, it will find a bakery in Iowa. If the Hollow King reaches for it, the basement will collapse into consecrated stone. "And Grace?" I did not answer. Morrow stepped closer. "What protection have you arranged for her?" "Everything. Nothing. I had placed gold in her name, property in her name, safe houses on 4 continents, allies who owed me debts they would hate honoring. I had written letters to priests, demons, queens, thieves, and one retired schoolteacher in Edinburgh who had once killed a shade with a knitting needle. None of it would keep grief from finding her. I am ending the source, I said. You are walking into his realm alone. I am difficult to kill. You want him to? The room went cold. Morrow held my stare. Loyalty is a lovely thing until it grows teeth. Before I could answer, the library door opened. Grace stood there in a dressing gown over one of my shirts, her curls tied back carelessly, her brown face drawn with exhaustion and fury. A blanket hung around her shoulders. One hand braced the doorframe. My heart did something vile and human. Absolutely not, I said. She looked at the papers in my hand. Morrow, leave us. Morrow, traitor, bowed and went. I rose too quickly. You should be in bed. I was. Then I woke up married to an idiot. In my defense, you knew that before the vows. Grace crossed the room slowly. Every step cost her. I hated every visible proof of pain. I hated more that she refused to let me carry it for her. Her hand closed around the leather folder. I did not let go. Grace. Patrick. The way she said my name left no room for performance. I released it. She opened the folder. Read. Her expression changed with each page. Confusion first, then understanding, then hurt so sharp I felt it through the bond before she spoke. These are adoption papers. They are drafts. They have signatures. Ambitious drafts. Her eyes lifted to mine. In the event of Patrick Vale's death. I said nothing. Grace turned another page with shaking fingers. You signed over the house. You like the kitchen. We do not own a house. You do now. She stared at me. I attempted a smile. It did not survive. You wrote them all down, she whispered. Every child. Of course I did. Do not say that like this is kindness. It is provision. It is goodbye. The words struck the floor between us and stayed there. I looked away first, a coward's habit perhaps, or a husband's. I found a way in, I said. Beneath the broken ridge, the Hollow King's realm is exposed where he tore through the quiet between. If I enter before he seals it, I can reach the root of the curse. And end it. What happens to you? I adjusted my cuff. It was absurd. There was blood on the sleeve. Ideally, I am celebrated in obscene ballads. What happens to you? The room had never been so quiet. I do not know. Yes, you do. I met her gaze. Grace's mouth trembled once before she mastered it. You do not get to love me and then make widowhood your wedding gift. The words went through me cleanly. Grace. No. She stepped closer, the folder crushed against her chest. You stood in front of courts and armies and curses and told everyone I was yours. You married me in front of children who have already lost too much. You let them start believing in staying. And now you are making plans to become another person who leaves. I am trying to save you. No. Her voice broke, but her eyes did not. You are trying to die before you have to be kept. For a moment I could not breathe. There it was. Not the noble tragedy. Not the heroic sacrifice. Not the grand black-cloaked exit into ruin. The truth. I could face torture. War. The Hollow King. Hell itself. But waking weak beside her, needing help, being loved after I could no longer protect anyone with terror, that frightened me worse than death. Grace came close enough to touch me, but she did not. Somehow that restraint undid me more completely. You think if you die saving us, None of us will have to see what is left of you afterwards, she said. There may be nothing left. Then let me stand there and find out. I cannot risk you. I am already at risk. She lifted her wrist. The black thorn curled under her skin, alive and listening. I am your wife. I am tied to this curse. I am the child he lost. Stop treating me like someone outside the war. Anger rose in me because fear needed clothing. You were stabbed through the soul. And I came back. You almost did not. But I did. She touched my chest then, directly over the curse. And when you were lost, I called you back. Do you trust me only when I am dying? I closed my hand over hers. No. Then trust me alive. I bowed my head until my forehead touched hers. For a while, neither of us spoke. The quiet between creaked around us. Somewhere beyond its wounded sky, the Hollow King waited with his thorns and his hunger and the stolen pieces of my life. Grace's breath warmed my mouth. If there is anything human left in me, Grace, I whispered, it is yours. Her fingers tightened in my shirt. Then do not take it somewhere I cannot follow. I kissed her because I had no honorable answer. It was slow, aching, terrible in its tenderness. Her hand rose to my face. Mine settled carefully at her waist, mindful of the wound beneath the bandages. I kissed my wife as if memory might become mercy, as if my mouth could promise what my fear refused. When she weakened, I carried her back to the healing bed. She did not argue. That should have warned me. She caught my wrist before I turned away. Do not make plans without me. I heard you. That is not the same as obeying. No, I said softly. It is not. Her eyes searched mine. I stayed until she slept. Then I placed the adoption papers beside her hand, kissed her knuckles, and left before dawn could accuse me. Morrow waited at the ridge with my sword. You are a fool, he said. Frequently. She will follow. I looked toward the healing hall one last time. I know. The ground beneath the broken ridge opened like a wound remembering the knife. Below it, a door waited in the dark. I stepped through before love could call me back.
I woke to an empty bed and a stack of papers beside my hand. For 1 second, I did not understand. Then I saw the names. Tessa, Eli, June, Samuel, Rose, Mateo, Hannah. Every child, every future. Every careful signature Patrick had left behind like a kiss and a wound. My husband was gone. Sable tried to stop me at the ridge. So did Morrow, which was brave, considering he could barely stand upright. I loved them both for it. I ignored them both completely. The door beneath the world waited where the ground had split open. It was not made of wood or iron. It was a wound in the air, rimmed with black roots and old light. Beyond it, something breathed, not loudly, not like a beast. Like a grave deciding whether to open. Grace, Morrow said behind me. I touched the cross at my throat. My fingers shook, but my voice did not. He is my husband. That does not make you invincible. No, I said. It makes me called. Then I stepped through. The darkness took me gently. That was the first cruelty. I expected pain, fire, teeth, some grand violence to announce that I had entered the Hollow King's realm. Instead, there was silence, and a cold so deep it seemed to have memory. The ground beneath my feet was black glass. Above me hung no sky, only roots stretching into forever, dripping shadows like rain. At the center of it all stood Patrick. He was facing a throne made of thorns. The Hollow King sat upon it, though sat was too human a word. He occupied it, infected it. He wore the shape of a man the way rot wears the shape of fruit. A crown of black branches grew through his skull, and where his face should have been, there was only a mouth and 2 burning hollows. Patrick did not turn when I arrived. That frightened me more than the king. The Hollow King smiled. "Little gate," he said. "You came after all." Patrick's shoulders tightened. "Grace," he said, and his voice was not his voice. Too low. Too empty. "Leave. I am getting very tired of that being your plan." The Hollow King lifted one long hand. The world changed. Suddenly, I stood in a city burning red under an infernal moon. Demons ran through streets slick with blood. A younger Patrick walked among them in black armor, golden eyes bright with power, his face beautiful and merciless. He raised one hand. A house collapsed. The vision shifted. A noble begged on marble floors while Patrick watched with bored cruelty. A family line erased because one man had broken faith. A battlefield where his laughter cut sharper than swords. A court of trembling creatures who bowed because fear had taught them the shape of worship. Each memory struck him. I saw it happen. Patrick flinched without moving. Darkness crawled over his arms like living armor. His horns lengthened, splitting at the tips. His eyes burned black gold, bright and terrible. The air around him bent beneath the weight of what he had been. The Hollow King's voice wrapped around him. "You were never cursed into darkness. You chose it because it suited you." Patrick's jaw clenched. "You enjoyed being feared." Another vision. A prisoner crying. A door closing. Patrick's hand stained with a life he had decided was not worth mercy. "You made yourself useful to hell," the king whispered. "Efficient, elegant, cruel. My beautiful, ruined boy." Patrick's wings of shadow spread behind him. "I did," he said. My heart cracked at the sound. Not because it was a lie, because it was not. I walked toward him through the visions, the burning city, the marble hall, the battlefield. I did not look away. I would not love him by pretending the blood was not there. "Patrick," he turned at last. For a moment I saw almost nothing of the man who burned toast in shelter kitchens and hid children's drawings in locked drawers. I saw the Duke of the Seventh Circle, Hell's favorite nightmare, a creature with thorns in his soul and grief sharpened into weapons. "Do not come closer," he said. I did. The Hollow King hissed. "Look at him, child. Look well. This is what you chose." "Yes," I said. Patrick went still. I stepped into the last vision and stood in front of him. "Yes," I said again, louder. "You have done terrible things." His face twisted. I reached for him, but did not touch him yet. "But terrible things are not the only truth about you." The Hollow King's mouth stretched wide. The black glass beneath me shattered. I fell into another memory. Not Patrick's. Mine. I was small again, but not Grace. Not the little girl left at Mercy House with a coat too thin for winter and fear tucked behind her teeth. I was the boy, 6 years old, missing one front tooth, clutching a wooden lamb with a cracked side. My knees hurt. My feet bled. I stood in that ancient hall of hell, while the Hollow King leaned down and called me useful. Gate soul. Door child. Key. The little boy looked up at me. His brown eyes were full of terror. I knelt before him. "Hi," I whispered. He held the lamb tighter. "Are you lost too?" I swallowed hard. For a long time. Behind us, Patrick made a sound like he had been stabbed. The Hollow King's voice thundered through the dark. "He was mine." I took the boy's hand. "No," I said. "He was never yours." The child's fingers were warm in mine. I looked at Patrick. He stared at us as if the sight might kill him. "You saved me before you loved me," I said. "Before you knew me. Before I could give you anything. That was you, Patrick. Not the curse, not hell. You." The darkness around him trembled. The Hollow King rose from his throne. "Mercy," he spat, as though the word tasted foul. You think one soft choice cleans centuries of ruin? No, I said. I think one true choice can begin on the road home. The king struck. A thorn root shot through the broken ground and wrapped around my wrist, biting into the black mark already there. Pain tore up my arm so fiercely I could not breathe. The little boy cried out and vanished into light inside my chest. Patrick roared. The sound shook the realm. He lifted both hands, and every shadow in that place answered him. The throne cracked. The roots recoiled. The Hollow King laughed, delighted. Yes, he whispered. There you are. Kill me with what I made you. Prove you are mine. Patrick's power gathered like a storm about to end the world. I forced my head up. Patrick, I said. His eyes found mine. The darkness wanted him. Revenge wanted him. Every wound he had ever carried opened its mouth and begged to be fed. Do not give him that, I whispered. The Hollow King drove the thorn deeper. My knees hit the glass. Patrick looked from me to the king. Then he did the one thing hell had never taught him. He opened his hands. The darkness spilled from him, not as a weapon, as surrender. It poured out of his skin, his horns, his eyes, his scars, his name. He let it go with a cry that broke through every root in the realm. The curse tore free like a living crown ripped from his heart. The Hollow King screamed, No! Patrick stumbled toward me, no power raised, no vengeance in his hands. He chose me. The black thorn on my wrist burst apart. Light opened between us. Not a gentle light. Not a safe light. A fierce, holy brightness that remembered every mercy ever chosen in defiance of cruelty. The Hollow King tried to retreat, but the throne had become a cage. Patrick fell to his knees beside me and caught my face in both hands. Grace. I covered his hands with mine. Behind him, the Hollow King unraveled. Not by sword, not by shadow. By the thing he could never understand. Mercy freely chosen twice. Once by a monster who saved a child. Once by a woman who loved him in the dark. The realm split open. Patrick collapsed against me, suddenly heavy, suddenly cold. His horns cracked into ash. His golden eyes dimmed to something human and terrified. I held him as the world beneath us gave way. Stay with me, I begged. For once, he did not have a clever answer. The door opened under us, bright as morning, and we fell through together. The door did not take us back to the quiet between. It brought us home. I woke on the wooden floor of Mercy House Church with dawn pressing gold through the stained glass windows. For one breath, all I knew was the smell of candle wax, old hymnals, and rain on stone. My cross lay warm against my throat. My wrist hurts. I lifted it slowly. The black thorn was gone. Only a thin, raised scar curved across my brown skin, where the mark had been, tender and clean. No shadow moved beneath it. No voice whispered. No king reached for me. Thank you, I breathed. Then I saw Patrick. He lay near the altar steps, half in the morning light, his torn black coat spread around him like a ruined wing. Except there were no wings, no horns, no burning crown of power under his skin. Just Patrick. Still. Too still. I crawled to him so fast pain sparked through my ribs. Patrick? He did not answer. His dark hair fell across his forehead. His face looked strange without the sharpness of demon power behind it. Not less beautiful, more breakable, more real in a way that terrified me. I touched his cheek. Cold. No, I whispered. No, no, no. The bond between us was quiet. The terrible thread of curse and shadow and heat had vanished. I could not feel him in the dark anymore. For one awful moment, I thought that was because there was nothing left to feel. I pressed my shaking hand against his chest. Nothing. I moved closer, put my ear over his heart, and held my breath. At first, there was only the church creaking around us. Then a beat, small, stubborn, human. Again, again, again. A sob tore out of me before I could stop it. He has a heartbeat, I said to the empty church, to the altar, to God. He has a heartbeat. Patrick inhaled sharply beneath me. I lifted my head. His lashes moved, his mouth tightened, and then his eyes opened. They were still gold, but not glowing, not burning with hell's fire. Just gold in the ordinary human way eyes could catch the morning and keep some of it. He stared at me as if I were the first thing he had ever seen. "Grace," he rasped. I touched his face with both hands. "I'm here." His brow furrowed. "Why is everything so loud?" I laughed through my tears. "That's your heart." He blinked. Then, with great offense, he looked down at his own chest. "My heart is rude. You're alive." I gathered that from the unbearable amount of sensation. He shivered suddenly, his whole body trembling. "Why am I cold?" "Because you're human." He stared at me. Then his hand lifted slow and unsteady toward his head. His fingers searched through his hair once, twice. His expression changed. My horns. Gone. His throat worked. He looked over his shoulder as if expecting shadows to answer him. Nothing did. My power? I swallowed. Gone. His hand dropped to the floor. For a second, grief crossed his face so nakedly that I almost reached for it like a wound. Then something else came after it. Fear. Not of hell. Of himself without it. "What am I?" he whispered. I leaned down until my forehead touched his. Patrick Vale. His eyes closed. The side door of the church banged open. "Grace?" Father Marcus stood there in his coat thrown over pajamas, hair flattened on one side, a Bible in one hand, and a fireplace poker in the other. I would have laughed if I had not been holding my newly human husband on the floor. Father Marcus took one look at Patrick and lowered the poker. "Oh," he said softly. Patrick opened one eye. "If this is a sermon, Father, I request postponement until after I have decided whether breathing is worth the trouble." Father Marcus crossed the aisle and knelt beside us. "Welcome home." Patrick looked away quickly. "If you tell anyone I became emotional," he said, voice rough, "I will deny it with my last mortal breath." "You have mortal breaths now," I whispered. He looked back at me, and then I kissed him. He kissed me back like he was learning the shape of life all over again. His mouth was cold at first, then warming under mine. His hand rose to my shoulder, weak but desperate, as if he needed proof I would not disappear now that the curse was gone. The air split open behind us. Morrow stumbled through first, sword drawn, bandaged, side bleeding again. Sable followed with 2 healers and a curse lantern that immediately went dark. Morrow froze. His eyes went to Patrick's head, his hands, his chest. "Your Grace," he began. Patrick flinched. Morrow stopped. The silence held. Then he bowed his head, not as a soldier to a duke, but as a friend to a man who had survived. "Patrick." Patrick's mouth trembled once. "Careful," he said. "You'll make me fond of you. I have endured worse." Sable dropped beside him and pressed fingers to his throat. Patrick scowled. "Must everyone fondle my neck?" "You have a pulse," she said, astonished. "So I have been informed. Apparently, it is very proud of itself." Before anyone could answer, the candles went black. A mirror of darkness opened above the altar rail. Father Marcus stood at once, poker raised again. Vespera stepped through. She wore silver armor cracked down one side, her dark hair braided with bone pins, and blood drying at the corner of her mouth. Even wounded, she looked like something sharpened for court and war. Her eyes found Patrick. For the first time since I had known her, Vespera had no clever expression ready. "The crown demands the Duke of the Seventh Circle answer for treason," she said. Patrick tried to sit up. His arms gave out. I caught him before he hit the floor. He looked deeply insulted. Vespera watched him, then unfolded a black parchment sealed with infernal gold. The seal lifted from the page like a living eye, searching. It turned toward Patrick. Then it cracked. The parchment burned to ash in Vespera's hand. She exhaled slowly. "Well," she said, "that complicates several executions." Morrow stepped forward. "There is no Duke." Vespera's gaze cut to him. He did not move. "The curse and the title were bound together," Sibel said quietly. "When one died, the other died with it," Vespera finished. I tightened my arm around Patrick. "He is not going back." "No," Vespera said, and there was something almost like respect in her voice. "He cannot. The crown has no chain for a human throat." Patrick looked up at her. "Tragic for them." "Humiliating, actually." "That is better," Vespera's mouth curved. "The seventh circle is vacant. Half the court will bleed itself trying to claim it. The other half will pretend they never feared you." Her eyes shifted to me. "You destroyed the Hollow King." "Patrick let go of him," I said. "That is not how hell will tell it. Hell tells a lot of lies." For a moment, Vespera looked at me as if she was deciding whether to laugh or kneel. She did neither. "I owe you a debt, Grace Holloway." "Grace Vale," Patrick said hoarsely. My heart turned over. Vespera's smile sharpened. "Grace Vale, then. How inconveniently sentimental." From upstairs came a small voice. "Miss Grace?" Tessa stood at the balcony rail in her nightgown, clutching Eli's sleeve. Behind them, one by one, the children appeared, sleepy, frightened, alive. Patrick went very still. Hannah pushed between the older children and started down the stairs before anyone could stop her. "Hannah," I warned gently. She ignored me completely and ran straight to Patrick. He looked genuinely alarmed. "Small human," he said. "I must advise caution. I am currently defective." She threw her arms around his neck. Patrick froze, then his eyes closed. One by one, the others came down. Eli stared at him. "Are you still a demon?" "No," Patrick said. "Can you still make bad things vanish?" Patrick looked at me. "No." Eli thought about that. "Can you still stay?" The church went quiet again. Patrick's hand found mine. Warm. Human. Shaking. "If I am permitted," he said. I squeezed his fingers. "You are." His stomach growled loudly. All the children stared. Patrick looked betrayed by his own body. "That was not me." Tessa smiled for the first time in days. "It was. Impossible. I am elegant." "You're hungry," I said. "I have fallen very far." Father Marcus wiped at his eyes and pretended not to. "We have soup in the kitchen." Patrick sighed. Humanity is relentless. But when Morrow helped him stand and the children gathered around him, like he might vanish if they left space between them, Patrick did not pull away. He leaned on me. Not because he was weak, because at last he trusted someone to hold him. And as we walked out of the sanctuary together, his hand stayed warm in mine. The house had too many rooms. That was what Patrick said the first time we stood in the front hall, surrounded by dust, sunlight, and children who had already begun arguing over which bedroom belonged to whom. "It is architecturally excessive," he announced. Eli looked up at the curved staircase. "That means big. It means someone lost a fight with restraint." I smiled despite myself. The house sat at the end of a long gravel drive, old and warm, and a little worn at the edges. Its white paint needed touching up. The porch sagged slightly on the left. The kitchen was enormous, with yellow curtains, and enough cupboards to hide 3 children, 2 snack hoards, and whatever emotional secrets Patrick insisted he did not have. There was a wide yard behind it, an apple tree that leaned like it had survived a few storms out of pure stubbornness, and more bedrooms than Mercy House had ever been able to offer. Bedrooms with doors, bedrooms with windows. Bedrooms where children could put their names on the walls and believe, slowly, that no one was coming to take them away. Tessa stood in the middle of the front hall, clutching a cardboard box to her chest. "Can we really pick?" Yes, I said. All of us? All of you. Hannah peered around Mrs. Alvarez's skirt. Even if I pick wrong? Patrick went very still. Then he crouched carefully because his human knees had become a subject of daily betrayal. Small human, he said. A room chosen by you cannot be wrong. It may be inconvenient to my sense of order, but I have been told repeatedly that my sense of order is not the law. I raised my eyebrows. He glanced at me. By a biased authority. Hannah considered this, then whispered, Can mine have the window with the tree? If anyone challenges you, Patrick said solemnly, send them to me. That means yes, I translated. Hannah ran. The others followed in a stampede of boxes, laughter, and shouting. Patrick watched them go with the expression of a man witnessing an invading army discover wallpaper. Father Marcus stepped through the front door carrying a lamp. You sure about this? I looked around the house. At the scratched floorboards, at the staircase where Eli had already dropped one shoe, at Patrick standing in morning light without horns, without a title, without hell burning under his skin. His hand found mine, warm, human, shaking just a little. Yes, I said. I'm sure. Not every paper had gone through at once. The courts were slow, and our family was complicated in ways no social worker's checklist had been prepared to understand. Some children became ours by adoption, some by permanent guardianship while the law caught up. Some still had living relatives being searched for with care, but emotionally, from the moment they crossed that threshold, they were ours. That night, Patrick burned the toast. Not overdone. Burned. Smoke rolled through the kitchen while 6 children yelled contradictory advice, and Mrs. Alvarez took the pan from him with the solemn pity usually reserved for funeral processions. Patrick stared at the blackened slices. Bread is treacherous. You turned the burner on high, I said. I wanted efficiency. You made charcoal. Humans invented fire and then placed it under breakfast. This is not my failure alone. Eli poked one slice. It snapped in half. Patrick looked offended. Do not provoke it. By the second week, he discovered taxes. I found him in the study surrounded by envelopes, receipts, legal forms, and a calculator he had threatened twice. This, he said without looking up, is a government curse with stationery. You once managed 3 infernal estates, a fortress, hidden realm finances, and a war. Yes, but hell was honest about torment. I kissed the top of his head. He caught my hand before I could walk away and pressed his mouth to my knuckles. His eyes lifted to mine, gold and tired and entirely human. That look still undid me. Not the old court look. Not the smile that made demons step back. This was quieter, hungrier in a different way. A man who had spent centuries surviving and now wanted something ordinary so badly, he did not know how to ask without making a joke of it. The children were outside with Morrow, who had become, to his horror and their delight, some strange underworld uncle. He claimed he was teaching them defensive strategy. From the window, it looked like he was being defeated by jump rope. Patrick stood. You have flour on your cheek, he said. I have been making biscuits. I approve of this human ritual. You approve of biscuits? I approve of you wearing my shirt while making them. Heat moved through me so suddenly, I forgot what I had been about to say. Patrick noticed. Of course he did. He stepped closer, slowly enough to give me room to move away, which I did not. His hand settled at my waist, careful at first, then firmer when I leaned into him. The study door was half closed. Afternoon light fell across the bookshelves and the ridiculous piles of tax papers. We have approximately 12 minutes, I whispered. His mouth curved against my cheek. Your optimism remains one of your more dangerous qualities. Patrick. Yes, wife? I am trying to kiss you. Far be it from me to obstruct grace. That was terrible. It was theological. I laughed, and then his mouth found mine. The laugh disappeared. For all his complaining about mortality, Patrick had learned human wanting with alarming devotion. His kisses were warmer now, less like fire, more like breath and need, and a heart beating too fast under my hand. I slid my fingers into his hair. He made a sound against my mouth that went straight through me. "Grace," he said, rough and low. There was no curse between us now, no bargain, no court watching, no darkness waiting to claim whatever love we gave each other. Just us. My husband's hands moved to the buttons of my shirt. Well, his shirt. "You are wearing stolen property," he murmured. "I married the owner." A clever legal defense. I tugged at his collar. "Stop talking." "Beloved, if I stop talking, you will have to confront how devastatingly attractive I am in silence." I kissed him harder. He stopped talking. The buttons gave way beneath his fingers. I pushed his jacket from his shoulders, and he backed me gently against the desk, careful even while wanting me. That care made the want worse. Sweeter. My skin warmed under his touch. His mouth moved from mine to my jaw, then to the side of my neck, and I held on to him like I had once held on through death. "Door," I breathed. He reached back and shoved it closed with one hand. From the hallway came Hannah's voice. "Miss Grace." We both froze. Patrick's forehead dropped to my shoulder. "No," he whispered, as if negotiating with heaven. I closed my eyes. "Give me one moment, baby." There was silence. Then Hannah wailed. Not a small cry, a full-bodied, betrayed, end-of-all-things scream. The doorknob rattled. "Moments mean people, go away!" Everything in me changed. The heat did not vanish so much as step aside for something older, deeper, and immediate. I pushed Patrick's shirt closed over myself while he yanked his jacket back on backward, which under any other circumstance would have been funny enough to ruin me. I opened the door. Hannah stood there with her face wet, fists clenched, curls escaping from Tessa's crooked braids. Behind her, Samuel hovered with a guilty expression and a wooden lamb in his hand. "I didn't mean to," he said. "I told her grown-ups need moments." Hannah cried harder. "Then they leave." I knelt even though my knees protested. "Come here." She launched herself into my arms. I held her tight. "I am not leaving." "You said moment." "I know. Moments are when people pack." Oh, my heart. Patrick crouched beside us, jacket still wrong, hair mussed, mouth swollen from kissing me. Hannah looked at him through tears. "You too," she accused. His expression softened with a kind of devastation only children could draw out of him. "Yes," he said quietly. "Me too." "You won't go?" Patrick looked at me once, then back at Hannah. "No, I live here now." "With us?" "With all of you. Even when we cry?" "Especially then," he said, sounding deeply offended by anyone who had taught her otherwise. Hannah sniffed. "Even when you're tired?" Patrick sighed. "I am tired constantly. Humanity is very poorly designed. But yes." She considered this. Then she climbed from my arms into his. He caught her awkwardly, still not used to the way children trusted him with their whole weight. His eyes closed for a second over her head. Samuel held out the wooden lamb. She wanted this in her room. I took it carefully. The toy was not the same one from my first life. Patrick had carved this one a week after we moved in, though he claimed it was therapeutic woodworking and not sentiment. Its little side was slightly uneven. Perfect. "We'll put it by the window," I said. The rest of the evening became baths, lost pajamas, one argument over whether apple slices counted as dessert, and Patrick reading 3 pages of a bedtime story. In a voice so dramatic that even Morrow, stationed in the hall, leaned closer. By 10, the house finally quieted. I found Patrick asleep in the big chair in the living room. Tessa was tucked under one of his arms, Hannah under the other. Eli had fallen asleep on the rug with a book open over his face. The lamp cast warm light over them all. Patrick's head rested back against the chair, his mouth slightly open, utterly defeated by ordinary love. Once, hell had feared him. Now a 6-year-old had drooled on his sleeve. I stood there for a while and let the sight heal places in me I had not known were still hurting. Later, after we carried children to beds and checked every door twice because peace was still new to all of us, Patrick and I stood on the back porch. The yard smelled of grass and apples. "You never answered me," I said. He glanced down. "About what?" "Do you miss it?" He knew what I meant. The power, the title, the terror. For a long time, he looked through the kitchen window at the bright house full of sleeping children. Then he looked at me. Humans created every good thing I've ever loved. My throat tightened. He took my hand. His palm was warm in a completely human way. Then he leaned closer, his mouth brushing my ear. "And if no one has a crisis in the next 5 minutes, I intend to finish kissing my wife." I laughed softly. Inside the house, a floorboard creaked. We both went still. No crying followed. No footsteps. No tantrum. Patrick smiled. "Miracle," he whispered. I pulled him inside by the hand.
Take me to heaven. There's a light in your eyes I can't explain, like a fire running through my veins. Every time that you say my name, I'm never quite the same. I was drifting in a world so cold, afraid of letting my heart unfold. Then you came and you pulled me through. Now I'm lost in you. When you hold me, the walls come down. I forget every fear I found. In your arms I can finally breathe. You're all I need. Don't you let this moment slip away. Say the words that you're scared to say. If this love is a chance we take, don't let it break. Show me heaven tonight. Take me higher than I've ever been. Hold me close, don't let go. Let this feeling pull me in. If forever is real, then I'm ready to fall into you. Through the dark, through the light, all I need is you. So don't let go, don't say goodbye. You're the reason I can fly. If love is where we begin, take me to heaven.